What are your favorite PS1 games? Mine, Final Fantasy VII, Suikoden. They are my most popular answers, standard obvious ones, but perhaps one of my most contentious picks is Azure Dreams, a game that came and went without almost any fanfare whatsoever. In fact, reviewers of the time felt it was decidedly mediocre. Well, I'm here to tell you, maybe, but I goddamn love it. In fact, it's one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm gonna spend way too long trying to explain as to why. And although I may not be able to fully win you over with my arguments, or give the true feeling the game gives to me, I hope you can hear my case and respect my points, even if you don't agree with it. Because I really think this day and age, with literally every soulless game in existence having some sort of roguelite element in it, I think in 2023, Azure Dreams would be served better. Big thanks to my Patreon supporters who supported this video. I very much appreciate it. Supporting me means I can give more focus to a bit more Jordan and provide you quality content much faster. Aside from getting to watch these main videos early, ad-free, you get behind the scenes content, voting, and access to a secret little Discord, plus an exclusive bonus video. And this episode's bonus video is taking a quick look at the Game Boy version of Azure Dreams, because yes, that does exist, and it's pretty sweet. There's a lot of stuff too on my Patreon, but I'll talk about that later. So, what is Azure Dreams? Azure Dreams is almost like my dream game. I don't particularly enjoy roguelikes unless it's of the mystery dungeon style, and thankfully, this is. This is a game that encompasses everything I love in video games, except for one small thing which I'll get to later. You are a young boy from a rundown town whose only source of income is a fearsome monster tower that, due to its magical properties, changes every time you enter. Your task is to venture in, claim its treasure, fight, and even tame the monsters that lay within. You build your town up as you get closer and closer to the peak with the riches that you earn. That's if you can handle it. Now, this video is going to be formatted slightly differently than usual, mainly for the fact that the game is kind of non-linear, in that the progress that is made just depends entirely on both your skill and your luck. There's also not that much of a defined narrative. What I'm trying to say is, I can't walk you through the story because, aside from the beginning and the end, there isn't one. There's just a ton of side stories that you may or may not see. Not everyone gets the same experience with Azure Dreams, and that's another reason I'm going to try and cover everything I can. It's going to be a weird one, not my usual style. And to be honest, I'm not sure it's going to work. But this is my one shot to talk about Azure Dreams and get everything off my chest. So I'll think of it more as a therapeutic exercise rather than chasing the algorithmic riches. I'll fully admit, this is not a game for everyone. Firstly, it's a roguelite before roguelites were fashionable. It can be quite difficult, oftentimes frustrating, as you can rely on random elements saving you, especially if you're inexperienced. It's a game you have to take very cautiously, you have to be very careful. If you're gung-ho, you will probably just keep hitting a wall of progression. It can be played fast, but Azure Dreams is best played slow, like a game of chess. You can play chess fast if you want to, but you end up looking like an idiot, knocking over your opponent's pieces as you panic with your move. You do know it's illegal to clothesline the queen, right? For me, part of that difficulty is what makes it so rewarding, but I'll get to that later, I'm sure. You'll be exploring this tower repeatedly. It's mostly randomized, and you'll always start from the first floor, which can feel a little bit too repetitious for some. I guess some people need that feeling of progression and don't like treading over old ground, even if the maps are never the same. So yeah, I am well aware no matter what I say about this, not everyone will agree with me, and that's fine. We all like different genres. I have an internal bias against anything with cards or deck building elements. Doesn't matter how good they are, I will probably dislike them. And some of you will probably hate this. So as much as I appreciate the engagement for the algorithm, you don't need to express your shock and anger at how I could possibly like it more than other games. Please keep that in mind. This is my opinion and I want to share it to you, so maybe you can give Azure Dreams a try, because I seriously wish this wasn't swept under the rug by Konami, and I hope one day it can make a return. If you're still not convinced, well, keep watching. But here is the elevator pitch. You are a video game executive. You've got your suit, you got your Bugatti in the car park, you've got your staff dismissal forms after record-breaking sales. What if I said to you, a Pokemon-like, roguelike, with town building and romance elements? Eh? What do you mean it won't pay for your 5th house in Barbados? Okay, I guess you need a bit more. Okay, so here's literally everything about Azure Dreams. The game starts with your birth. I just find that funny. I mean, what other game starts with you coming out of your mama? I guess it makes sense though, because you get to name your JRPG character, and when do parents officially name their child? When they are born, so you better be there to see it. Don't come waltzing in 15 years later to rename them Jeff. Why didn't they just go a step further? Like name the character and choose the gender during one of the ultrasounds? That's an idea for the Pokemon Company. You are the child of Guy. Not just any guy, the guy. The greatest monster tamer in Monsbaiya, which is a town that's built entirely around the economy of monster egg trading. See, in this little town, there's also this huge frigging tower. 40 floors, each crawling with treasure, monsters, and their much coveted eggs. And Guy is the guy you need if you want to go treasure hunting in there. He's widely considered the only guy badass enough to possibly make it to the top one day. Yeah, no one in living memory has made it there before. You have a brief look through Cherrl's Childhood, which is your official name, although I do love this little thing on the name selection screen. It just says Dick, as though it's tempting me to name him Dick. I think it stands for dictionary, as it gives some potential predetermined names, although I personally stick with Cherrl. You get some small moments as you get a quick look at your dad being very dadly. He tells you to treat girls nicely, which is great advice for this game with its dating elements. As Cherrl is a bit older, and your mama is pregnant with your little sister, well, it's raining. You know what that means in a JRPG. Some shit's about to go down. Your father has been in the tower, doing what he does best, but he's been an unusually long time this time around, although, you know, time moves in different ways. A few minutes in the tower is actually a few hours outside. He's been long, but did he finally make it to the top floor? Would he be the first man to reach it and make it out alive? Whatever's happening there, there's definitely some anime crap going on up at the top. You can almost see Goku if you squint hard enough. As the thunder flashes, there's a knock at the door. This familiar, known as a unicorn, is a polite little fella, but he is here to signify the bad news. Guy's monster returning by himself? That can only mean one thing, and your father is gone. Although if I'm being harsh, if he chose a unicorn as his battle companion, then he deserves everything that he gets. The greatest monster tamer in the land, are you having a laugh? Unicorns are for posers, not prosers. So it's time for Kewne to grow up without a father in his life. His family's quality of life takes a massive tumble as his mother struggles to bring up 2 children without much in the way of income. I mean, she could have just married some wrinkly old rich dude, but she's more prideful than that. Or, you know, she could have got a job, I don't know. Apparently they made it this far thanks to slowly selling off all of Guy's monsters that he tamed during his life. And we cut to Kewne coming of age. It's time to step into the world. And by that we mean, never leave this town and live with your mother forever. And you gotta provide for her and your little sister called Weedy. I guess she's a bit of a pest. It's time for you to try and follow in your father's footsteps, preferably not to his grave. That's a joke, his rotted corpse is in the tower, he does not have a grave. So, rather unprepared, you're told to just go up to the tower up north, go in, find treasure. I mean, you don't even have a weapon. Your mum, bless her soul, gave you a piece of fruit, but that's not going to do much against the monsters. In fact, they'll probably be drawn towards you since they love that shit. I think she's just a sucker for misery. She loves the widow attention. You know, throw your son on top of that. Oh, she's laughing her way to the sympathy bank. Well, luckily, just before you open the doors, a monster wanders over towards you. But this one is very different from the usual monsters that you've seen, since this one can actually talk like a human. He's called, look, I don't even want to say it. Now, I'm not one to usually rename tame monsters, but I'm calling him Albert. Not because he reminds me of my granddad, although, you know, maybe with that nose, maybe he does. So now you're in the tower. There are 2 goals. Firstly, get to the top of this 40-floor ziggurat, and second, loot this bad boy dry. When you enter, you'll be greeted by a small tutorial, shock horror, and it's decently thorough about what you need to do to survive, and it's also very explicitly clear about things you can do, but most certainly never should do. For example, saving. Never save in the tower. Even if your wife is going into labor, do not save in the tower. Tell her to man up and wait while you find a wind crystal. Save at home before you leave for the tower. Secondly, eggs. You can hatch eggs in here, but don't be a moron because it means they won't go back home with you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. How does this game play? You may be familiar with the term roguelite. If you're not, very super quickly, it's a term based off the game Rogue, which featured harsh mechanics of if you die, you start from scratch, you lose everything. Your adventure is also randomly generated. This spawned roguelikes, which are games that copied that formula. However, once developers realized gamers are cowards and needed to be constantly patted on the head, roguelite was termed, where you lose a lot of progress, but you keep some things, usually unlockable abilities, so there is some small sense of progression, even if dying can still be harsh. Azure Dreams is a roguelite, before that was even a term. Personally, I like to say it's a mystery dungeon style game because, well, it almost certainly is like a mystery dungeon style game with its own twist of monster collecting. You climb the tower as far as you can, loot the treasure, and you try to escape when you feel like you've pressed too far. If you die, you lose almost everything. The only thing that sticks is your money and the experience your monsters gain. You lose all your items and all the experience points for Co. And even if you survive, and even if you want to try again, you must start from the first floor, and Co is back at level 1. He has no experience, no matter what. But there is progression, and progression can be either slow or really slow. You could get super lucky, but for the most part, Azure Dreams is a game where you'll have snail's pace progress if you're not overly familiar with the game like myself. In fact, at times, it may feel like you're going backwards, and you can get really pegged back if you die at the wrong time. More on that later though, because we're currently walking through the tutorial, which will show you about finding items, equipping weapons, getting out your monster known as a familiar, as though you're a witch or something, how to program their AI, formation, and it will adjust you to the combat of the game. While looking at the game, you may think it's real-time exploration, but no, Azure Dreams is a turn-based game, just like all the great dungeon crawlers before it. You make a move, the monsters in the tower then make their move. It's almost instantaneous though, which adds a seamlessness to the flow of the game. There's no waiting around for the monster to make its move, it already knows what it's gonna do. So much so, it ends up looking like it moves at exactly the same time. If you stand still, literally nothing will happen. Using the X button to attack, the enemy will retaliate almost instantaneously. If you've got a familiar equipped, then they will do their attack as well. There are a few advanced techniques, believe it or not, that experienced Mystery Dungeon fans may already be aware of, and if you always keep them in mind, your experience with Azure Dreams will be a much smoother one. For now, let's just talk about aiming. Sometimes monsters can come at you from weird angles, and it's really easy for you to accidentally move to a different space rather than facing the enemy. Well, a key technique is to hold down the triangle button, and then you can freely move the D-pad around and you will face that direction without actually moving. This is needed when you need to attack a specific monster who may be at a diagonal. If you hold down the triangle button and press circle, this will do something useful: skipping a turn. Not doing anything is one of the greatest tactical advantages you can have in this game, especially when it comes to approaching enemies, since it's always you who technically moves first and then the enemy responds to that. So it's very easy to find yourself in the attack range of a monster and allowing them to get the first blow. But if you use the skipping technique, you can lure them into your range so you can get the first hit in. This isn't essential in all encounters because, to be frank, if a Palumpa pops up, you can just laugh in their face. Any damage you take will quickly be recovered. Oh yeah, this game is tough, but it is nice enough to heal you and your familiars over time, either by walking or using the skip technique to boost it up quickly. It's always worth healing up before stepping on an elevator. Every time you enter the tower, it is completely regenerated in terms of both the map layout and the items found within. Inside the tower, there are plenty of randomly generated items that you will need in your adventure, many of them useful for the offensive on the monsters. There are all kinds of swords, shields, and wands to help fight them, alongside magic balls. Magic balls are absolute lifesavers, and I'm not talking about Mystic Mega she warns you about that truck that's about to plow through your front window. I'm talking about magic offensive weaponry. Mostly of the flame variety, these can pack a punch and save the day when you're really up against it. I love the mystery and risk involved in them too. You may notice that in your inventory the text is a greenish color, which means there's something unknown about them. And what is unknown? Well, the mystery is how many uses they have left. How many times can you use them? Can you use it 5 times, 3 times, or is it empty? You have no idea. And if you're face to face with a dangerous monster who may take you out in one hit, you'll be praying your blaze ball has more gas still left in it, because if you use it and it says there's no magic power left, well, that's a turn used up and you will get a smack to the face. There are 2 ways to find out how many uses it has left. The first, well, that's using it and telling you there's none left. But less annoyingly so, you can pick up the truth glasses. Using these on the ball will give you an exact number. If I had to criticize these magic balls, is that the offensive magic is really one-sided in terms of the fire attacks. You have flame, blaze, pillar, and fire. They're all fire. Couldn't they have been a bit more inventive? I do appreciate that there are a surprising amount of different balls though, many of them quite rare. There's recovery ball, blinding ball, paralyzing balls, itchy balls. I particularly like the ice rock ball. It doesn't damage or hinder the enemy, but it does distract them. It's the equivalent of a piece of string to a kitten. They just can't help themselves but attack it. This is only used in specific circumstances, but it can save your life if you've got no attack but need to make a getaway. The best ball is the very rare acid ball. This is a super powerful ball that will annihilate every enemy in the room that you're in. So it's the only one that can hurt multiple foes at once, and this goes above and beyond. It is quite overpowered, and that's why it's rare and will only have like 1 or 2 uses before it runs out. It's particularly satisfying if you use it on one of the more quirky random elements of the game, a 1 in 100 chance of generating a floor that is entirely just one room. There are no corridors, just a giant room filled with items and monsters. Whipping this bad boy out and causing a massacre does not get old. There is another form of magic, 2 in fact. Your familiars tend, but not always, to have their own magic attack which you can set them to use via their AI programming, or you can command them to do it manually. And then there is mixed magic, which I think most normal Azure Dreams fans will swear by, but I almost never use it. This is where your familiar gives their magic to your weapon and you do a physical magic attack. This can be powerful if set up the right way, but I'm not a wand guy, never have been, so it's something that I have neglected. I can almost hear the cries of horror from hardcore fans. How can you make a definitive retrospective on Azure Dreams and brush over the magic? Sorry, it's just how it is. But you can make some really powerful stuff depending on how you play. I just don't play like that. I prefer whacking monsters with metal, not wood. In Azure Dreams, you're always going to come up against an almost insurmountable wall at various points. Ko, our red-headed hero, he can level up in the tower, but he always starts from level 1 no matter what. And no matter how much you try to level up, eventually you're not going to make any more progress, or the monsters will become too tough for you. If you're just starting out on your first adventure, by the time you get to like the 5th or 6th floor, you're going to be sweating more than Prince Andrew talking about a photo. Even if you get lucky with decent equipment, even if you grind out a few levels on lower floors, eventually a balloon's going to rock up and put you on your knees. You're going to want to run for the safety of home with your tail between your legs and your newfound treasure between your arse cheeks. Progress in this game doesn't come from doing well in a dungeon one time. You will need to take stock and go again. But remember, you go back in, you're back at level 1. You're back on floor 1, so how do you make progress and hope not to run into the exact same wall? Well, progress comes in 2 forms, your equipment and your familiars. The former is a bit risky, but it's definitely essential, because if you escape the tower with a wind crystal, you take back all your items with you. You'll want to sell most of them aside from eggs and a few more useful items, but your primary sword and shield you will want with you for the long haul. You'll find loads of them in the tower. You can see their attack power, and it makes sense, you know, a steel sword is better than a copper one. Same with shields. You may get a bit unlucky if you equip a sword you just found, but then it can be cursed, which means that it's 1 stage weaker than normal and you can't unequip it, unless you find a decurse scroll or you escape the tower. Thankfully, decurse scrolls are fairly common, and also for some reason, cursed equipment pulls in like nearly 5 times the price when you sell it. people be hungry for dark magic. So it does have a silver lining. If you find a cursed gold sword, you'll be feasting. Or if you're like me and found a cursed dark sword, you'll be bathing in the juices of all the money grabbing girls. What a find that was. Basically paid for my mansion. But if you don't have a cursed one, the essential thing is upgrading them. And I love this for the fact it's quite rare to be able to power them up. In amongst the myriad of items found in the tower, you'll occasionally bump into red sand and blue sand, which my daughter would make the snazziest castle you've ever seen with, but in this game, you use them to augment your sword and shield respectively. One red sand equals a +1 to your sword's attack power. The longer you keep the same sword and shield, the more power-ups you find, the stronger you will get. So much so that Ko's level becomes almost meaningless. It's worth being loyal to the same equipment because there's no real super weapon that you'll get aside from right at the end, and the base weapons don't have much between them. You're better off sticking with one weapon and powering it up as much as possible. Same with the shield. The issue is, of course, fainting. If you lose all your HP in the dungeon and are warped back to the town, you lose everything, including all your equipment. So those hours, like 20 hours spent powering up that nice sword and shield, you'll be saying goodbye to forever. Forever, yes. And that happened to me. I am an experienced player, but one time when I was at the end of this run, I'd already completed the game. I'd already built everything in town. However, I was very careless and I lost my high level powered sword and shield. Why? Well, my monster was blind and he bumped into me and he thought I was an enemy and took me out in one blow. Gotta admit, that really hurts. Thankfully, as I said, I was at the end of my adventure, but if this was in the middle, it would have been utterly devastating to lose such a high-powered weapon and shield, because you really do need something beefy to take you up to the tower and to the end. When your sword is a bit lower, however, it may be smart to keep a couple on standby. Have a main one that you take in with you, but don't be afraid to switch to a different one that you find in the dungeon, which may have an elemental advantage over certain monsters, because a fire sword can have a serious advantage over cyclones, clowns, and this can be very useful early on. If you do fail, however, thankfully the game isn't so harsh as to leave you at square one. You still have a lifeline and something that will always keep you from being at your lowest point. You may start at level 1 every time you enter this place, but your familiars will not. As long as your familiars were hatched in your home, they will always keep their experience and their levels. This is a godsend early on when you're almost relying on these guys to keep you safe. My little Albert and your little Albert will be your best bud for at least half of this game, because if you hadn't realized by this point, he is a unique monster. You won't get any other of his kind again. Well, more on that later I suppose, but think of him as sort of a pseudo-legendary Pokemon. He is not super powerful, but he's decent and unique. And while he may lose some of his badassery later on compared to some other familiars you may be lucky to get, you will want to respect this little guy as he will carry your ass up the tower. Let's take a small break from the tower, shall we? You have to remember the only way to get out of this place safely and with all your items intact is via the wind crystal. It doesn't matter how strong you are or how strong your monsters are, it doesn't matter what your current personal goal is with the current expedition. The first and most vital goal upon entering the tower is to find a wind crystal. I don't care which religious beliefs you have or which god you look up to. Forget that Jesus fella just for a minute, okay? And now you should pray to the wind gods. They are not easy to come by, trust me, and it doesn't matter how experienced you are with this game, you can be totally derailed by the lack of a wind crystal. I personally feel I'm quite good at this game by this point. Annoyingly so, I wish I could forget everything and start from scratch, but even me, I was shaking like a shitting chihuahua when I was way over my head on floor 15. I got 2 eggs and not a goddamn wind crystal in sight. I did eventually find one as the krakens were closing in on their prey. If you have an excess of wind crystals, it may be good to bring one in with you, which will save you some stress, but you have to remember, you can only enter the tower with 5 items, and that's including your familiars and your weapons, so there's not much room for any excess, and I always prefer to risk it. A sword, a shield, and 3 familiars. That's how I rock into the tower, and I know some of you think that's overkill, but familiars are my favorite part of the game and I want to use them all. Plus, I like to have one of each elemental genius. One fire, one wind, one water. That covers everything. But anyways, while I'm not going to focus on the town right now, I do want to briefly head back and talk a little bit about the town, because if I only ever talked about the tower and then only talked about the town, you'd think that they are a separate kind of experience, but that is not the case. There is a genuine flow to Azure Dreams, and I want to try and cover that. Once you've had your first taste of the dungeon, it's time to head home with your loot safely in your bag. It's time to take in the sights of Monsbaiya. This is pretty much the entire outside world. Literally, this game is just this small town and the tower. Although as a kid, me and my best mate, we fantasized about the prospect of another tower in another city once we finished this one, but we were very sad teenagers. Upon returning home, you are greeted by your mother, who immediately wants to sell all your treasure. That's not a great look, but she is very useful. It means you don't have to go to the shops and do it manually. You can select everything you want to sell. As I've said, you'll want to sell most things aside from your equipment. There's actually a little secret mechanic in this game that can make your life easier, and it's to do with some of the loot here. I won't say it right now, I will save that for the tips and tricks section at the end, as I would prefer you to experience the game in the proper way. But if you don't want to do that, then yeah, wait till the end and I'll tell you a little trick that will make your life a million times easier. But anyways, oftentimes this is the first time you'll be able to identify what monsters are in the eggs that you've collected. You'll be lucky to find 1 or maybe 2 eggs per adventure, so be thankful when you do. You can use truth glasses found in the tower to identify them early on, or your mother can tell you when she offers to sell your gear. She's got X-ray eyes or something. It's always massively exciting as you rush to see what's in the egg. Many times it can be anticlimactic, like, oh, another balloon. But sometimes there is a rush of happiness when it turns out to be something rare or powerful. I mean, I literally cheered out loud when I found a barong. Anyways, you always go straight for a nap after selling your stuff, and you get woken up in the morning by your childhood friend and neighbor, Nico. From here, you can head into your monster hut, which is where you'll want to hatch your eggs if you choose not to sell them. A quick side note, you can sell either eggs or the monsters themselves, but eggs fetch a way higher price. I guess collectors like them sealed or something. Scalpers, no doubt. I don't know exactly what's going on outside the walls of this town, but I bet some prick is out there sealing them in a plastic box and then sticking an arbitrary number on them, and then trying to charge 5 times as much. But we don't care about that. We're just a scavenger. If you hatch your familiars in the hut, then they will become bonded to this place, meaning that they are definitely yours and will return to this spot no matter what happens. It's small at first, but can be upgraded just like everything in this town. It's pretty rubbish right now, but as you get richer, so does this town. You can see that Ko and his family have become impoverished since they have the smallest hut in the entire place, but boy is that gonna change. Prior to delving back into the tower, you're gonna want to do the rounds in Monsbaiya, visit the shop, buy some gifts, have a meal at a local restaurant, talk to people. You'll see this place slowly change over time, and you will be part of that. You'll also get requests from townspeople who want help for things that will also improve the town. Most of the time it's monetary help, but sometimes it's for things found in the tower. So yeah, take a look around. It's a nice place. You can't do everything straight away. You need to get higher up for things to start to really happen, but do not neglect it, as it is a vital part of the experience. As I said, I'll talk about it in more detail later, but I just wanted to tell you the flow of the game. The tower, the town, the tower, the town, the yin and the yang, the sausage on the sandwich. Let's get back to the tower. You're back at level 1, you're back on floor 1, but now you should have some decent equipment and your familiar is leveled up a bit. The monsters on the first floor will feel like almost nothing at this point, but do not neglect them as it's an easy level up at this point, and the unforgiving tower will creep its way back up to kick you in the balls. On the first floor, you'll definitely want to get to at least level 3 or level 4. That's pretty easy if you just kill a couple of trolls. In terms of the tower structure, the maps are always randomly generated aside from the first, which has half a dozen variations for some reason, and the second floor. The second floor is a bit of a weird place because you'll bump into either your rival Gosh or his sister Selfi, who very much lives up to her name. They are from the wealthiest family in town, and the size of their bank balance is only eclipsed by their arrogance and self-importance. They look down on poor little Ko, as though he's a cockroach that should be stamped on, and tempers often flare between you and him, whether in the restaurant where you try to one-up each other, or he tries to date the girl that you fancy, or on the second floor of the tower where he will taunt you. And you can either square up to him and have a one-on-one fight, or you can back down. As you may guess, he might be a bit tough still early on in your adventure, and if you didn't level up on the first floor, but if you do manage to out-duel him, maybe by pulling out your familiar, it's fine, we can play dirty too. If you win, you get a free medicinal herb, or on rare occasions he will drop a wind crystal. It's not massively worth it to be honest, but hey, that herb can help a little bit. Sometimes you'll bump into Selfi, but aside from the odd rare cutscene for her side quest, she doesn't say much, or nothing super exciting happens, but I'll focus on that bit a little bit later on in this video. The actual environments of these floors, they don't change, they're only slight visual differences and the gradual monster variation. You can find just as rare of an item on the first floor as you can on the 39th floor. The challenge is entirely in the monsters and their steady increase in power and also gimmicks. Let's go through all the monsters, shall we? Well, most of them, because some of them are actually quite rare, and maybe I could play this for 100 hours and not be lucky enough to show them off to you. So yeah, I'm going to show most of them, but not all, okay? The first enemy we encounter is a Palumpa, or as me and my friend used to call them, Umpalumpa. This appears on floor 1 to 3. These are the basic enemies that are like the slimes, the ratatas, the goblins of Azure Dreams. The base enemy that is the weakest one in the game. Technically they aren't the weakest monster, that would probably go to the frog, but they are the weakest one you can actually fight and tame. And tame them you will, unless you make a catastrophic mistake, you're gifted this as your first egg. In fact, you're gifted 2 eggs in this game, and both are Palumpas. They are adorable though, and part of me wished that they could evolve into something half usable. But no, Palumpas are most certainly not a viable monster to use in this game. The biggest shame is that there is a variation of the Palumpa way higher in the tower. It's still weak, but it looks cooler. It's called a Dark Palumpa. It's got like some battle scars on its eyes, and sadly you can't get this version at all. Also, on the first floor, you'll come across a Noise. Now that is the name of the monster. This is such a forgettable monster because he doesn't really have much of a gimmick. The only thing he may do is try to seal your familiar's magic, but you shouldn't be using your familiar on this floor anyway, and he only ever appears on floor 1 to 3. The only reason you'll be familiar with him is because you'll always go past half a dozen on every single trip to the tower. Trolls are the toughest monster in the first couple of floors, but that just means for a decent amount of experience. You can get to level 2 just by defeating one of these. Trolls are adorable monsters, and they're one of the most common enemies in the game because they pop up in various segments in your journey up the tower. That makes them quite unique, because aside from the Dark Palumpa and Minerva, only the troll will appear at intervals. They are slightly different forms however, because they have a really interesting if not particularly viable gimmick. Weapons. You can equip weapons to trolls, not your sword, but they have their own little set. The weakest one is the hammer, which looks more like a mace. There's a crossbow for long distance, and then there's some sort of scythe. So you can really feel like you have a little buddy with you, like you got a pet chimp wielding a weapon. Sadly, despite that, they don't have the endurance or stats to make them hugely useful unless you spend way too much time leveling them up and fusing them with something that would be more useful than the troll themselves. Nice idea though, and they are one of the more iconic enemies in this game. You'll take out more trolls than any other enemy, I am sure of it. Flames can appear on the second floor, although kind of rare, and there'll be a common enemy up to the 5th floor, which is where things will start to get overwhelming on your first visit or two. So they seem like they can be quite mighty, and they will, mainly due to their elements. They are obviously fire type, the counter to which is water. But at this point, you won't have any decent water familiar unless you change the element of your little Albert, which I wouldn't advise doing so right now. Albert should be decent against them, but not brilliant because the 2 fire elements cancel each other out. The thing about Flame that sets it apart is that it's one of the early monsters that is actually quite good, and if you grab an egg early in your adventure, you should be happy. He's decently strong, has decent magic, and he's one of a handful of monsters that can evolve. Yes, there is an evolution mechanic in Azure Dreams. It's only kind of hinted at, but without any guide, you'll be guessing as to who and when it will happen. Well, the rule is level 20. If they can evolve, they will do so at level 20, as long as you haven't fed them a leather fruit, which stops them from changing form. My Flame, which I called Z, evolved into an Ifrit. And if you hadn't seen by now, I named all of my monsters after my Patreon supporters. At random. Z, I'm not saying you look like this, alright? But I'm sure you're pretty badass as it is. Although my actual Flame and my Ifrit were right with me way up to the very end of my adventure. Sure, I could have replaced them with something more powerful, but they're strong enough that they are viable, and the emotional connection isn't easy to break. Another monster you'll become very familiar with, starting on the 3rd floor up to the 6th floor, is the Cyclone. Pretty badass name, fairly badass look. This is a wind monster with a pretty impressive use. You probably won't want to use them as your warrior because they can be pretty pants, and their usual ability is meaningless against enemy monsters. They will cast anorexia on others, which will stop them from eating things. This can be dangerous for you because it means you can't top up your MP with fruits and stuff, but using from your perspective, what's the point? Where the Cyclone comes in best is with the fusion, because if you fuse it with another monster, and that other monster is the dominant one who stays, the Cyclone will pass on a super useful ability which will make your familiar consume magic points at half the normal rate. You're essentially doubling the amount of magic points that they have. And MP is a huge thorn in the side of many familiars because not only do they use MP by using magic attacks, they even use it by physically attacking and even just walking. And this is debilitating if you don't find any pitta fruits along your journey. It may seem annoying, but it is brilliant design because it inherently means that no matter how powerful your familiars are, you can't use them all of the time. Unless you're super lucky with item finds and super conservative about who and when they attack, there's no way a familiar can go all the way from the 1st floor to the 40th. I mean, it's not impossible, it's just highly improbable, so you have to ration their usage. But this fusion ability can go a long way in making it more reasonable for you. If your familiar has no MP, they just pass out asleep and are like sitting ducks. So, if you get a Cyclone, consider fusing it with a stronger monster and essentially doubling their longevity. Something every man needs. From the 4th floor of the tower, you'll start to notice the bafflingly ugly Balloon. Look, if you're going to be on the nose with your monster naming, at least spell the damn thing right. Inherently, there's nothing too interesting about this creature aside from being massively unappealing. The only thing you'll initially notice is the higher stats that he's rocking compared to those currently around him. You'll definitely need your familiars to help out if you're not equipped decently. The gimmick thing about Balloon is that if you have one, he has a special ability that allows you to skip a floor of the tower. He will zoom you up to the next floor, which I have to be honest, I struggle to see the market for, because Azure Dreams tends to have the balance that if you're strong anyways, it's super easy to power through to the next floor. You'll find the elevators pretty easily. However, if you're not strong enough, there's no real advantage to skipping floors because you're always gonna be dead meat. Perhaps in an emergency situation, like you end up in a monster room and you need a quick escape, like maybe, but those are super rare. In 30 hours of playing this game for me for this playthrough, it only happened like 3 times, so yeah, I just think they're kinda useless. The only other thing fairly unique about them is something that you may have noticed, their annoyingly long death animation. Of all the monsters they gave a unique death animation to, they gave it to this one? Next up, we have a very unique creature in Minerva. I actually have zero idea how to say it, but that's how I've always said it as a kid, so unless someone wants to correct me, I'm still rocking with Minerva. Minerva is not a particularly powerful monster, but it has two gimmicks that make it stick in the memory in the long term. The first of which you'll be able to witness the first time you come across them from the 5th floor. Minervas aren't strong, but they have strength in numbers. They're like amoebas in the fact that they multiply, but in a slightly more masochistic way, because you need to hurt them, then they will multiply. Never go to an S&M club with one of these guys, because it gets crowded pretty quickly. The second or third Minerva that pops up, I can't remember if there can be more, they are much weaker, but every little helps, especially if you're weaker and are fighting alone. They can even overwhelm and distract your familiars. They might be too busy dealing damage to the weaker ones while still taking big hits from the main powerful one. It's pretty cool. They may not look appealing, but they are fun to fight. And that's why they're used a couple of times up the floors just like trolls. But later on, when you see them, like in the 20s, they found a new ability, the Mimic. Sometimes you'll see two treasures together and think, oh sweet, but then it turns out that one of them is a Minerva all along and it ambushes you. I have to admit, I fall for it more often than I like, but even when you do know what's going on, as far as I know, there's no decent way to deal with them anyway, so sometimes if you really want the treasure, you might as well take a smack to the face. Of course, if you're rocking a Minerva, well then you can use their ability to your advantage. You can transform them into an object that's next to them, including another familiar. That's pretty handy. On floor 6, you'll start to bump into one of the most annoying enemies in this game, Bloom. Why is Bloom annoying? Well, he's a pansy. I mean, he's a literal flower. Secondly, they are quite common eggs. If you're not picking up a Bloom every couple of tower runs, then, well, you should probably play the lottery more often because you must have 4-leaf clovers for pubes. It's fine the first time you get one just to complete your set, but seeing them over and over can lead to disappointment. The main issue with them is their special attack, brainwashing. They vomit a yellow powder over your familiar, which I like to think of as mustard, but if successful, it will turn your familiar against you, and not in a confusion-like way, where maybe they'll hit you, maybe they'll hit the foe. No, they just straight up want to murder you. It can be dealt with, but it can also range from annoying to outright disastrous. Just imagine you're still rocking low equipment, you want to whip out your strong familiar to help you out. Well, if they end up turning on you, you might get taken out in one hit. So you don't want outright powerful familiars with you when Blooms are rocking the place. Thankfully it does wear off after a short while, but it's still not an enjoyable experience as you try to leg it from your own familiar. You can pop them back in the bag, but next time you take them out, no matter how long in the future, they'll still be brainwashed and will instantly hit you, so make sure you're prepared for it. The one card up the sleeve the game gives you is that your starting familiar, your little Albert, he cannot be brainwashed, which is nice of them. What an absolute legend he is. Floor 7 introduces a menacing foe, a foe that can almost always strike first, U-Boat. It's a dumb name, but it is Azure Dreams. I wouldn't expect anything less. I guess World War I actually happened here. So as you can see, this is a submarine-like creature. I wonder which came first, the monster or the craft. If it's the craft, then that's some pretty swift evolution. I can just imagine an amoeba just chilling on a rock and then a submarine rises from the bottom of the ocean and he thinks, I'm having that. So yeah, these are strong. They hit first most of the time, and the biggest thing, which I briefly mentioned before, their genus or elemental type. They are water. We've come across water ones on lower floors, also Bloom, but the thing is, your little Albert, probably still your strongest familiar, is likely to be a fire genus, so you are well up against it with this new strong foe. You need a wind type to combat easily, but sadly, you probably don't have a useful one right now, so I would advise keeping a Gulf Wind sword handy at this point, if you find one, as it will make your life quite a bit easier. If you don't, and you don't have a wind familiar with you, you'll be dreading seeing one of these slink closer and closer to you with nothing that you can do to stop it. Now, floor 8 will introduce a fairly badass wind genus monster, and if he's your familiar, awesome, but if you see him in the dungeon rocking up towards you, you will groan. And the stronger you are, your familiars are, the worse the clown is. The clown is a mischievous little bugger, carrying a strong scythe. They are glass cannons, but their strength isn't the annoying part, it's their magic. It's called Lowdown, which gives you a ton of information in a succinct way. Okay, not that kind of lowdown. I mean, it reduces the level of either you or your familiar. It's fine for you, honestly. It's not ideal, but you definitely don't want it to hit your familiar because gaining levels can take ages for them. If they successfully cast lowdown, if you defeat the clown, you will get the level back. Your familiar will get the level back. But what you don't get back, however, is the experience they built up. So if your familiar was just on the verge of leveling up, but the clown gets you, well then all that experience is gone and you'll have to grind it up all again. Like I said, the stronger your monster is, the higher the level they are, the more painful this is. Clowns are an absolute nuisance, and I swear the modern views on clowns being hated are solely down to Azure Dreams. I mean, how could anyone like them after these little shits? Now for me, the counter to this is kind of simple. Just don't have any familiars out during the couple of floors that clowns exist on. But if you don't have a strong enough sword and shield, that can be a big ask. So here's my techniques. 1. Skip these floors as fast as possible. As soon as you see an elevator, go up it. You might miss some decent items, but you can live. They're only on 3 floors, it's not a huge deal. Or 2. Attack them from distance. Many familiars have magic that can be shot out. And also, magic balls. I use more magic balls than I should have by blasting these buggers to bits before they got near me. Overkill? For sure, but I'd rather use balls than feeling like I've been punched in the balls. Floor 9 introduces another tricky enemy, Dreamin'. These guys are super weak, they can barely hurt you, but they like to introduce pain in a more sneaky way. No, not via gaslighting and emotional blackmail, they love putting you to sleep. 50% of the time, they will try to make you go to sleep, which will put you in a massively vulnerable place for about 5 turns. While you're probably safe with a dreaming wailing at you, like your mom trying to wake you up to go to school in the morning, if they are paired up with a stronger monster like a U-boat or god forbid a clown, this can be massively dangerous. You won't last long. So, despite my previous advice, you should whip out a familiar to be with you at your side to protect you in case the worst happens. That's the cool thing about Azure Dreams. Taking in or out familiars doesn't really cost that much, so if you can be bothered to see what monster is ahead of you, you can adjust accordingly. If you see a clown coming in on the horizon, well, put him back in the bag. If you see a dreaming rocking up, get the little bugger out. Floor 10, we're a quarter of the way there. Floor 10 introduces you to the volcano. This round-ass creature is called a volcano not because he bursts out lava plumes to melt your enemies, but because he shits out rocks. I mean, if you're gonna have a turd, at least be impressive, and this is quite impressive. I mean, even after I've had a steak and potato pie, I can't produce something of that magnitude. Sadly, it doesn't do this often, but the main thing is to distract your familiars. They will be so enthralled by the rock that they only want to attack it and not the volcano itself. So they can either escape, which monsters of this game don't really have the AI for, or they can attack your familiars without being hit back. That's quite an ability, but like I said, they do this so few and far between, it is negligible. It's only an advantage for you if you have a volcano familiar and you can use it to make your escape if you're in a tricky situation. Floor 11 is when I feel the game decides it's going to ramp up the difficulty. You'll probably have to spend a decent few goes before you can start to make some serious progress past this point. Floor 11, that's mainly thanks to the appearance of the Griffin. Griffins are really powerful creatures in both physical and magical attacks. They can blast you from afar and really decimate your unprepared familiar. If you're lucky, by this point, you may have a U-boat or something to help combat the fire type, or maybe you want to change the genus of Albert, but I'd hold on to that for just a little bit. Unless you have some water familiar, these will be a pain in the arse for a good while. Even when you're strong, they will still fight back. As you may expect, Griffins are a pretty decent option to have as a familiar for yourself, especially if you want a fire type. Of course, you may already be rocking a flame at this point, and even Albert who starts off as fire, but I'd advise changing him soon. So it's certainly something to think about, because also like flames, Griffins can evolve into Grynort at level 20, and they are pretty good. Floor 12 is when, for me, things really hit the fan. This is a big wall made by the Kraken. Krakens are very strong physically, defensively, and they also have electric protection, meaning if you hit a Kraken with most physical attacks, you will get recoil damage. That's the same for familiars as well. This will decimate you, and they are also water types, meaning that if you don't have a strong wind familiar, you will hate to see these every single time. That's why I personally advise switching Albert to wind type at this point. To do that, you need to find a special seed. They are not exactly common, but you'll probably come across one or two at this point. If Albert has been your main familiar till now, with a decent level to his name, and now being wind, you will sleep easier for sure. Either that, or have a strong clown, or change another strong familiar to wind. You need wind. As a kid, these mofos haunted my dreams. These made the game feel almost insurmountable, a literal wall I could not get past, because I wasn't really smart enough to think about it, but still, they're never an easy ride until you've got over-leveled familiars and strong equipment. And even to this day, when I got an egg and it's a Kraken, I feel such a sense of joy, a great feeling that I got such a strong monster. It's funny then that they never seem quite as menacing when they're yours. But the thing about the 12th floor is, it also gives you a wonderful gift that can start to swing things in your favor. Another collar. You may have noticed at times, depending on what footage I've shown you, I have two monsters out at once, and you can do that once you pick up this on the 12th floor. It's absolutely essential and opens up the game so much in terms of helping you overcome the odds. Naul will start to appear on the 13th floor. These are ostrich-like creatures that through training in the tower can evolve into a batnel. But as the standard creature, they are quite timid. They don't hit hard, their defense is okay, but their main gimmick is that they can heal themselves. That's cool. And it's nice if you have one as your familiar, but when facing them, it's just a mild inconvenience because they don't hit hard enough to make you feel worried. I mean, so what if they heal themselves? It'll only take like one or two more turns before you actually defeat them. I haven't really used these in my time playing the game because I prefer a bit more muscle in my monsters, but I did level it up for this playthrough just to show you the batnel. Floor 14, you'll see a cool looking monster known as a Garuda, which reminds me of something to do with Zelda, but it also has a bit of an Egyptian god vibe in the design. Really interesting. They're strong, almost equally so as Kraken, but they don't have that recoil. They're also wind types, which shouldn't be too much of a hassle since it's likely you'll have a strong fire type to combat them. The gimmick for this one is that they can essentially steal your monster. Not forever, but they pick them up and fly them away to a different part of the map, leaving both yourself and your familiar isolated. By this point you should have the second collar, meaning you won't be totally alone, but your familiar that was taken, well, that can be a death sentence unless they're really strong. You know, they won't last long by themselves, so either find them quickly, or you can use a familiar bell which will instantly call them to you, or you can find the elevator to the next floor which will make them all congregate together. Floor 15 is the first example up to this point of no new enemies being introduced, but that doesn't mean it's an unimportant floor. I'll get to why later, but it does hold a significance for the town building aspect. A small one, but one nonetheless. 16 is a magic number. It's a magic number because it's one of the most exciting floors in the whole game. It's the floor where you'll see the Barong. Well, that's if you're lucky. I almost never saw a Barong as a kid, but they are truly a wonderful monster. And prior to making this video, I was worried I might not even be able to show them off because of all the gimmicky monsters, this is one you can really twist in your favor. The Barong is a monster that you can throw any item at and it will eat it. What's so good about that? Well, just like my dog, it'll puke something back up. Unlike my dog, however, it's probably going to be something rare and shiny. I'm still waiting for my dog to puke up a diamond ring. Yeah, you can throw anything, no matter how cheap and rubbish, and you will get something random back out. Most of the time it won't be anything massively interesting, but there are times when you can see your bank balance lighting up. Diamond shields, money ones, and there are even items that aren't available in the tower by normal means. Like this scroll, it's utterly useless, but it takes away all the walls and elevation. You can't find this in the tower, it can only be puked out by a Barong. Many people say this is exploitative. cheating your way to good items, but let me tell you, the barong is rare, and it only appears on very specific floors with a very low appearance rate, and you can't use it all the time because it runs out of magic points very quickly. Yeah, you can restore its magic points and then go again, like some poor bloke whose missus is ready for the second round. You can top him up and make him go just a little bit extra longer. And not only are barongs the rarest encounter in the game, they are by far and away the rarest egg. You only have a 3% chance of an egg belonging to a barong, and it's only on specific floors. If you find a barong, count yourself extremely lucky. My wife was confused as to why I cheered so loudly a few weeks back when I found out that one of my eggs was indeed a barong. I think I used up all my luck that day. Most people have to resort to finding one of the more rare items in this game to get a barong. There's this ultra rare piece of fruit called a roche fruit or rocha fruit, I don't know how to say it. It's so rare that I can't even show you since I didn't see one in this playthrough. But having had it before, it is an item that if you throw at a monster, it will transform it into an egg. Think of it like a Master Ball from Pokemon. And that's the best way to get a barong, although like I said, the fruit might be even rarer than the egg. I tried not to exploit it too much because it is less fun if you rely on it, but it's an interesting little gimmick and I didn't really get much out of it anyways, but I'm just happy I got to show off the barong to you guys because it's almost legendary in the Azure Dreams community. Floor 17 introduces an annoying enemy, the Picket. It looks awful, it acts awful, it's essentially a thief, as it rocks up, steals something from your inventory and then pisses off to somewhere else on the map. If you want that thing back, you gotta go hunt it down and kill it. It also has a penchant for stealing something valuable like gold swords, eggs, magic balls. Those are its favorites, so you don't want to let him take anything. These are super weak creatures, like they can't hit you hard at all, but they do have the ability to act twice in one turn, which means they can attack twice. They can also move twice, meaning they can actually sneak up on you and take things away quickly. It also means they are a pain in the arse to track down. I usually fire off a magic ball to teach them a lesson, because getting close with the sword, that's almost impossible. Thankfully they can't steal anything from your familiars. Well, okay, technically they can, but I'm not going to go into that, so if there's one nearby, make sure your familiar takes it on instead of them getting close to you. They are weak, so any familiar will probably kill it without an issue. Floor 18. Now floor 18 is when things start to get serious again. We've probably just recovered from Kraken ordeals and things have started to balance out with some slightly weaker enemies. We've revisited some Minervas and trolls along the way, not too tough, in fact maybe even a bit relaxing. But now the pain is coming back with Arachna. Arachna may look sweet and cute, but damn they pack a punch. Glass cannon is definitely the phrase for these little turban spiders. They hit painfully hard. In fact, pound for pound, they can be one of the strongest monsters in the game. And indeed, I got myself an Arachna and proceeded to make the most of him. That's their gimmick really, they're just bloody strong, and you definitely need an elemental counter for these if you want to survive. Floor 19 introduces the Wee Dog, or Weird Dog, or Were Dog, I don't know how to say it, but these are kind of strong and menacing if you don't have the right genus matchup, and they do have a gimmick, but they use it so infrequently, so much so that I do remember seeing it one time in my playthrough here, but I cannot be asked to search through 30 hours of footage to show it for 1 second. But yeah, let me just explain it. They can throw out a piece of meat which is supposed to lure in your familiars, which allows them to strike. Not super interesting. Believe it or not, floor 20 introduces 2 new monsters, don't faint. One of them we've seen a long time ago, but I think this represents a big breakthrough in the gameplay in terms of your progress. It's the halfway point. It's also a point in the story where you get a key item which can open new doors in Monsbaiya, but more on that later. Firstly, the monsters. Vipers are the most menacing one. You can tell from their name alone. If anything is called a viper, you're probably gonna watch out. They don't have any poison like you'd expect, but Christ, they hit stupidly hard. Their attack power is so crazy high compared to the other creatures that we've seen so far, even more so than Arachna. Interestingly, in all my years playing Azure Dreams, I have never had a viper as a familiar. I've never found an egg with a viper in it. I think it's because of the eggs in this area. There's actually a large percentage chance that you may get a kick in the balls with a troll egg. It's the most common egg up here, and if that's not living up to its name, I don't know what is. I always wondered why they were called trolls, because they're kind of cute. They don't look like me, for example, but now I know why. Those rare adventurers who made it up here found an egg, got massively excited, but it turned out it was this little gimpy guy, so yeah, if I ever found a viper, it sure as hell would have been mine. I'd have used it all the time. Unicorn is slightly less interesting. The two interesting things about it is that it was the first monster you ever saw. Your dad had one as his familiar, and it was the one to deliver the news of his untimely demise. I heard he did it through shadow puppeteering. And secondly, it can evolve into a creature called a Univern, which I assume is pretty good, but I don't think I've ever had one before. I did find a unicorn egg for this playthrough, but it was right at the end of my adventure when I'd finished everything, so yeah, I didn't press on to try and evolve it. I guess I could have done it, but I didn't fancy spending an extra hour worth of recorded gameplay. My hard drive was already bursting. Of all the monsters the developers chose to show as Guy's familiar, I've always been perplexed as to why it was this one. There's no way he'd gotten to the top with just a unicorn. It would have had to evolve at some point. Why not something a bit more badass like a viper? My only theory is that from now on, the bigger, stronger monsters tend to be, shall we say, not particularly cute, and maybe they wanted some cute, mascotish character to be his main familiar, and Unicorn is perhaps the last station on the cuteness line. Floor 21 is when things get kinda weird. No new enemies are added, but the Palumpa makes a return in two varieties, the normal one and the dark variety. The normal one is still at level 1 like it was on the first floor. I mean, what's the point? The darker one is stronger, but it's still way weaker than the other enemies surrounding it. And even though it looks much cooler, as I've stated before, you can't actually get one of these. They do have a pointless gimmick in the fact that they can bag up your monster. They literally shove them back in your inventory. Only under very unlikely circumstances could this cause a major problem. Floor 22 introduces Block. Block is a monster that can evolve into something called a metal. Physically, they don't hurt you too much, but I'm pretty sure you can already guess what their strength is. Their super high defense. Maybe even the strongest in the entire game. And these guys are a great opposite to an Arachna. They are the yin and the yang of each other, and they're well worth having if you're lucky enough to find an egg. And I did, but just like the unicorn, it was right at the end when I was wrapping up my time with Azure Dreams, so I didn't use it. Having used them previously in a proper manner, I do highly recommend them. They can be a little daunting at first, but you'll soon won't be too afraid to come up against them due to their lower attack power. It's easy to overwhelm their defense if Ko has two familiars wailing on it at the same time. Floor 23 introduces a mild-mannered creature, Stealth. Now I'm pretty sure we all follow this dude on Twitter if you're into Nintendo Switch stuff, but I'm not surprised people don't remember him from his appearance in Azure Dreams, because I swear, every time I get up here I'm like, oh yeah, this guy exists. He reminds me of a mole crossed with a turtle, and his little secret is that he lives up to his stealth name. He gets his Marauder's map out and rocks his invisibility cloak. This could be a really dangerous aspect, but two things. Firstly, your familiars don't fall for it. They always seem to know they're lurking there. And secondly, even when they do hit you, you can generally tell where they hit you from. If your familiars didn't have a clue, and if you couldn't instantly see which square they're on, they'd be much more dangerous. As it stands, they tend to get in the first hit just like a U-boat, and that's it, which diminishes their uniqueness, I suppose. Zoos are introduced onto the 24th floor, and I know what you're thinking. What kind of irresponsible git would stick a tourist place halfway up a monster-filled tower? Well, I better educate you on the wonders of capitalism. But no, I misread because it's not zoo, it's zoo with a U. It's a lion head with a flying snake body thing. They're kinda strong, but you've been dealing with vipers the past 4 floors, so it's not a step up from those or anything. What's their gimmick? Well, they have a roar which can paralyze Ko, but if used on your familiars, it will change their AI, from protecting Ko to writing weirdly enthusiastic online news articles with a weird penchant for adjectives. Oh no, not that kind of AI, your monster's AI. If you didn't see, there are 5 settings, most of which you'll never use. 1 is telling them to stand still and do nothing. Sounds pointless, but it has its uses if you want to quickly level up a weak monster. 2 is to follow me, keep your mouth shut. 3 is to only use backup magic, which I think is defaulted on the game, kinda weird. Don't waste all your MP so quickly. 4 is directly attacking foes with physical attacks, and 5 is just go on a murderous rampage. Honestly, stick it on 4, keep it on 4. Zoos, the cheeky little sods, will change this. It's not difficult to go into the menus and change it back, it's just putting that extra bit of hassle into your day. Floor 25 doesn't offer anything new, but it does bring back the picket, which is for a story-related reason. It's a different colour, and if you've done certain things in the town, you'll be able to grab something from it, but more on that later. Floor 26 introduces 2 new monsters, 2 water enemies, Snowman and Mandara. Snowman is kind of a crap name because you'd expect, well, an actual snowman, which would have been awesome. Its Japanese name is actually Sasquatch, which makes more sense. I mean, why didn't they just call him Yeti or something for the Western release? I don't know. This evolves into a monster called a Saber, which, sadly, again, I didn't show off properly for this video. They look kinda cute, I suppose, and they can pack a little bit of a punch. I think this could be a rival for Guy's Unicorn. Why didn't they give him a snowman? Probably because of their name. Mandara is a bit weird. There's a Sentinel Guardian vibe going on with these guys, and I've been trying to think about this a worryingly long time. Like, what is it that sets these monsters apart from the others? Usually they have a gimmick, like no matter how small, but Mandaras, they don't have anything. They don't have a talent. They don't even have magic. They're a bit weird. Any more extreme Azure Dream fans out there, please tell me what these guys add to the game aside from looking like a polluted disco ball. And you know what, as much as I love Azure Dreams and I love the fact that it feels like every monster has its own raison d'etre, not just there to fill up the numbers, I think that by this last third of the tower, they sort of almost give up on that. Not entirely, but from now on it does feel like the only thing being different is ever increasing strength. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. There's nothing new on the 27th floor, but 28 is already trying to make me eat my words. Napless, which is the most wrong name they could have given it because this ain't lacking in the nappage. This snoozy little devil is strong as hell, but he does have a weakness. He's like my dad, give him 5 minutes with nothing to do and he's asleep. He just randomly has a snooze, which can be a liability no matter his physical and defensive strength. However, you remember that little weakling called Dreamin', the one that makes monsters fall asleep? Well, if you fuse them together, you can have a napless that doesn't suddenly fall asleep. Gives it insomnia, which is an awesome thing to have. Floor 29 introduces Killer. Yeah, if you thought Viper was a badass name, how about Killer? I mean, this lives up to its name. You don't go walking around with axe for hands without being called Killer. I mean, it's either going to be named Beauty Tunes or something. You can tell what his gimmick is pure power. And he is seriously way stronger than anything we've seen up to by this point by an order of magnitude. This is a massive sense of dread when you see one of these guys for the first time because you can almost know he's gonna kick your ass no matter what. You don't want to confront him. Tyrant is on floor 30. He doesn't quite live up to his name. You'd expect something really beastly looking, but no, he's just a pissed off scorpion. And I get it, I'd be pissed off too if I had to live as a scorpion. He's not particularly strong himself, but he certainly bolsters the threat around him. On this floor, you have Napless, Killers, and these. That's one hell of a threat. He has his rage moment thing that goes on, but I'm not entirely sure what it does, apart from sometimes they start fighting each other, which, you know, that's actually kind of helpful. Floor 31, we have an iconic enemy appearing. But before we get to that, we have a super rare story-related cutscene. It's been a while, guys, but we see a man called Beldo, at least a vision of him, who says he's waiting up on the top floor for Ko. and he's trying to lure you up there with the promise of your father. So yeah, things are gonna get interesting, and from now on, if you get to this floor but then go home, you won't have the usual wake up routine. You'll feel all kind of miserable and stuff. You won't have your girlfriend waking you up. You just wake up and you're all mopey because you're thinking of your dad. So yeah, for those final 9 floors, there's a melancholiness within the air, and you just want to get up to the top to make that go away. You want happy-go-lucky Azure Dreams again. But with Beldo out of the way, we see the new enemy, the slightly boringly named Dragon. These are beasts in every aspect, but that's not the coolest thing about them. I don't remember where I read this, but dragons are the only ones who can have their MP topped up by something rather unique: money. In your adventures, the most common items found are the coins. Bronze on the lower floors, silver once you get past floor 10, and then gold when you're in like the 20s. They add a nice amount to the bank balance, but by this point of your adventure, they're probably not going to be making the meat of your income. That's where you can sacrifice a coin or two by picking one up and feeding it to your dragon. Feed coins to your dragons and it will almost never run out of magic points, which is one of the very few rare occurrences where I'd say maybe, just maybe, you could take a dragon from floor 1 to floor 40 in one go. Now, you may have noticed my dragon looks rather smaller than normal. That's because a unique aspect to this one, unlike other monsters that can evolve, the one in the tower is the evolved form and you can only get the baby version via an egg, and they are conveniently called kids as though they're baby goats or something. Floor 32, we get all icy with Glacier. Glacier's gimmick is that they can slam into you from far away as though they're a curling stone or something. So much for slow moving ice sheets. Sheet you not. They're not as strong as you'd think, even defensively, especially compared to the godlike dragon at this point, but they can take you by surprise with their attack. If you're on low health and one speeds in like a bull in a china shop, it could be devastating, so you need to be on your toes, but that should be a given at this point. The next floor, we get to see the ultra defensive Golem. She can take a hit, but also isn't afraid to deal out the pain either. And I say she because, well, I'm sure the fan art has already been taken too far with this one. She can charge up her long spiked ball arm and then fling it across the room, giving you a good old whack. If you see her charge this up, just take her out quickly. Floor 34 doesn't present anything new, but 35 gives us our final monster in this game, the aptly named Maximum. What is their gimmick? They are just big bastards who love a good scrap. You can almost see the Newcastle brown beer in their hands as they rock up to the pub, not to hang out with their mates, not to hit on some drunken girl, they just want a fist fight. You know those sort of guys. Now yes, they are stronger than dragons. I mean, just look at them. But dragons are no slack, they're only just a little bit stronger, and in fact dragons have better defense, so overall a dragon's stats are higher, but I just think the way they look just makes you bob yourself. And from floor 35 up to the final floor of 40, there are no new monsters. Just very murderous creatures that we've already encountered. I do feel at this point, the game is definitely running its course. It's running out of steam a little bit, not that you feel it's getting bad, but it is winding to a close and you can really feel that. Obviously, every game has to come to a close, and I think it would have been better if this had peaked slightly more climactically. Maybe the last 5 floors could have been insane, or have older monsters come back and be way beefier than before. I think they could have done something more exciting, but that's just me begging for more content, more Azure Dreams injected into my veins. But after struggling past the last few floors, eventually, after 30 hours of game, maybe even more, maybe a bit less depending on your skill, luck or patience, you will ascend to floor 40, where someone is waiting for you. Beldo is waiting at the top. It's an interesting encounter, perhaps feels a little out of the blue, since there's been very little build up throughout the game aside from the small encounter on the 31st floor, especially of this variety, because we get actual artwork of events that just happened. We find out that Beldo met Guy in the middle of the tower, and they decided to team up to get to the top. There is a big reveal about our little Albert. Beldo thanks Albert for accomplishing his mission. Wait, what? Beldo says that Albert is a part of him, and he absorbs him into himself like an arm. Long ago, he and Guy reached the top of the tower to find the ultimate egg, but Beldo betrayed him. Beldo is the only person, a magician no doubt, who can fuse himself with monsters, and he wants to take over the world by fusing with the ultimate egg. They fight, and Guy cuts off his arm. That's when the anime crap goes on above the tower on that fateful day, but before Guy is killed, he seals the ultimate egg, and the only thing that can break the seal is the blood of a monster tamer. So that's why Ko was helped by Albert, so the seal could be broken. And the final battle begins. Naturally, I am bobbing myself because I forgot Albert gets absorbed and I can't really remember if this fight is losable or not, but I didn't want to take any chances. I fire off magic, I bring out my familiars, and even though there is a final blow on me, at the last moment, Albert separates and comes to your aid with your father's sword. One hit will unleash the final attack and Beldo shrinks to his death, or at least Albert pockets him for some reason. Albert then apologizes for tricking you, but was compelled to do so, so of course you should forgive him. Pick up the ultimate egg and you're instantly transported home, and everyone, of course, is happy. And that's Azure Dreams complete. We get a nice credit sequence with nice music and art. But it's not truly over because we just got a damn egg, which is the ultimate egg. And it is a one-off variation, or like a slightly different variation of Albert. I'm not saying his name yet again because, well, and this dude is unique for the fact that he doesn't have any element and his magic is neutral as such. He's not the strongest monster in the game, I believe, and there's no real point to using him now, but it's like getting Mewtwo at the end of Pokemon Red. There's no real need, but it's damn cool. Whoa, what an adventure. I hope I didn't bore you with that full run through of all the monsters that lurk within the tower, but for me, they're one of the most attractive, appealing things about Azure Dreams. Seriously, I would say yes to all of these on Tinder, especially Mama Golem. Considering there are only 40 floors and even less monsters roaming within, if you don't count evolutions, somehow they balanced it perfectly to create an environment where it always feels like you're encountering something new, and not just new for the sake of it. 90% of monsters have their own gimmick, whether it be something you need to counter or something you can use, sometimes even both. Like Clown taking your level away, U-boats getting the first hit, maneuvers, multiplying, stealth, being invisible. Every floor you make it up, you're guaranteed something new to see, and it's mostly quite terrifying. Whether it be the Kraken, the Viper, or the Dragon to spoil your mood and your underwear, or just the weird appearances of a Barong, or seeing a Palumpa halfway up the tower, like what the hell? It's like a little treat, gives you a bit of nostalgia like, oh, remember that one? And while I agree not all of their designs are great, or at least didn't translate well to the pixel art that they're going for, these are more ingrained in my memory than even the original 151 Pokemon. It feels like they were all considered equally as to their purpose within this little world. Like, what can they offer? What sets them apart? Sure, I can't figure out, or at least don't remember Mandara, I mean, what are they doing? But that's kind of a one-off. I massively appreciate that they all have their own uniqueness. It's a feature that is massively overlooked in almost every other game in the genre. Because RPGs, as much as I love them, they are so guilty of this. Yeah, you have loads of enemies, but visuals aside, what is really different about them? What sets the bats apart from the rats, the trolls from the murderous dolls? I don't think most JRPGs go far enough, or at least they don't show it enough. Because it's so evident here in Azure Dreams that everything is unique and has something special about them. They'd fit right in with the modern world, just don't tell them that, otherwise it goes straight to their heads. There is a kind of feeling of being a little unbalanced in terms of new discoveries, with the last 10 floors or so feeling a little bit rushed, or maybe that's just the game's balance. You'll spend the first 20 hours getting through the first 30 floors, but then the last 10 floors seem like a breeze, like a couple of hours. Or maybe that's just my playstyle. Maybe it's because I know I'm almost at the end and I might as well push on to the top. The climax isn't quite as rewarding as earlier parts of the game, and there's almost a sense of disappointment that you have made it to the top and seen the end credits. Not because it's bad, but because you know there's nothing new to be discovered. And that's the best part of the game. The best aspect that keeps you striving for more is now gone. But you know what they say, always leave them wanting more, and you can sell a sequel giving them more. Where is my sequel, Konami? No, not that one, doesn't count. But discovering and taming monsters isn't the only aspect of Azure Dreams, and it's certainly not the only captivating aspect either, because it's just one part of a trifecta. Monsbaiya. Monsbaiya is a pretty small place in comparison to some other RPGs out there, but it manages to fit in a lot. It's seemingly run down at first. I guess the Monster Hunter business hasn't been booming much these past few years. Those eggs aren't as tasty as they used to be. Never mind, because it's your job to make it the bustling city it once was. Yes, the money you find will not only feed your family, but Azure Dreams' hero, Ko, seems to hold socialist values and wants to spread his wealth to the community. I'm just joking, he does it for tax purposes. As stated at the beginning of your adventure, everyone looks down upon Ko. He's a scrubby little boy from a poor family, Scaramouche, whatever that means. They laugh at you for even suggesting that you're going to be a monster tamer. But the further you get up the tower, the more they start to celebrate you, and that comes hand in hand with Ko's bizarre willingness to improve his entire town. But firstly, you always have to look out for number one, right? Currently, you have to take a bath in a rusted barrel. We've all been there, we've all got the metal poisoning to prove it, but at some point in life you do have to start moving up. So you can actually upgrade your house from a 1-bedroom bachelor pad with your mum to a 2-room, and then you can upgrade it into a mansion. There's not much real benefit to doing this in terms of gameplay. I suppose the biggest advantage is the increase in the size of your safe. But it's nice to see your progress in the game, and I do advise upgrading it at certain intervals within your adventure. I'd personally say upgrade the first time once you've reached the 10th floor, and then the second time once you've got to like 25 or 30 maybe. You could do it almost instantly if you wanted to, but you'll really need to spend equal amounts of time within to get the full experience of seeing Code develop as a successful treasure hunter. But the house is definitely second fiddle to the monster hut. From your bedroom, you have a room where you can put your eggs and hatch them. If you hatch them here, they will be your familiar forever unless you sell them or massively mess up by eating an oleum fruit in the tower. Don't do that, kids. This starts off tiny, but it is the first thing you want to splash your cash on. Forget roses for Selfi, forget the rubber ducky for your sister, forget the big booty poster, you upgrade that monster hut immediately. Alright, maybe the poster has slightly higher priority, but secondly, upgrade your monster hut. Again, you can upgrade it a few times incrementally, but that first upgrade is essential, otherwise you'll have more eggs than you can handle. Back to the house though. I love the development that you see, and the bath is definitely the best way to show it. I mean, I'm not poor by any means, but damn, I am jealous of that first upgrade. That's luxury to me. Never mind the final upgrade where you even get a random pool on your roof. You can get a random giant table, and the safe. Bloody hell, this is some sort of Miami Vice drug cartel secret stash thing going on. If you really have money to burn, you can decorate your home with all manner of weird and wonderful stuff like plants, TVs, beds, wallpaper, just loads of things, totally meaningless aside from a visual standpoint and showing how much you've come along since the beginning. If you're trying to complete the game fast, you'll want to ignore these completely, so that's why I neglected it until the very end, preferring to spend my money on other important things around town, like gifts for ladies. But before we get to the ladies, let's have a look at what can be built around the town. At some point early on, your mother will tell you, a bit more Jordan of the future, hanging about in the temple, he wants to talk with you, and for a start, you can offer to upgrade his temple. That's the biggest tithe I've ever seen. It doesn't have much of an effect aside from switching the Protestant feel into a more Catholic one, but also Jordan, well, after that, he will suggest something to make the town better. A casino, which is hilarious, but I suppose now you built a brand new temple, everyone else's tithe money, it's free game. A better blackjack never hurt anyone. The casino though is ridiculously expensive. It's the most expensive thing in the entire game, so you'll probably waiting until the very end of the game before you buy this. It provides a really nice distraction though, so maybe if you're lucky with some item pickups, you win the lottery with a dark sword or something, then maybe do it early because you can play 2 other minigames it has to offer. It obviously has the bandit, I can't even remember what they're called, the jackpot bandit thing, and it also has like a spinny wheel thing, like a, what are they called? Oh yeah, a roulette, except this is more like a fantasy roulette, but they are interesting. They are a good way to completely blow your money. Before the casino though, he will suggest a bowling alley, which is much more reasonable in terms of price. It has less things to do, but it provides a sweet mini game, the mechanics of which are almost ludicrously presented, but I like it a lot since there's almost no science to it, it's skill. Usually when RPGs have these sort of stuff, there's often one way to do it perfectly without fail if you know what to do, but Azure Dreams made a bowling way more interesting that I'm shocked that bowling centers around the globe haven't tried to copy it. You know, different formations and stuff. Seriously, who thought, you know these pins? Let's have them in the same shape every single time. Thrilling. Azure Dreams ain't standing for that staleness. You got different formations, you got a reason to have spin. Sure, it's nuts and you probably won't be good at it, and athletes, you know how funny they can get with a bit of extra challenge, but for me, this made bowling way more fun. It's also important for filling out your monster book like some of the other places because it has two non-threatening monsters, the bowling ball and the pins. Who cares if it counts as abuse? Entertainment is more important. One of the early building opportunities is you get this theater. You'll see a fabulous looking dude hanging out at the Carpenters, totally not being a creep. Well, he has ambitions of owning a theater. Obviously, you want this town to be more cultural, so you can build it. Building it provides two functions, the first of which is a minigame where you are in a comedy act. You have to react to Fon's words, either pressing X or circle, depending on if you want to let his comments slide or if you want to interrupt him. Maybe it's my lack of comedy awareness or the comically translated interactions, but I found it to be just kind of annoying. I didn't really care much for completing it because you don't get anything, so yeah, I didn't do it. The second function is for part of a dating sequence, which I'll get to very soon, so it is quite important, especially if you want to fully complete the game. The northeast side of town doesn't seem very interesting. It's actually quite barren, so you may not think to visit here much straight away, but if you visit this old guy, he will tell you of his glory days training Nyuls, these ostrich-like things that heal themselves. He laments that he can't go to a nearby town anymore to do racing stuff, but you can cough up the cash to build a whole racetrack. No kidding. You can race Nyuls with you as a jockey, and not only that, but you can also bet on the races too, which calls into question all sorts of conflicts of interest. And if footballers can't understand why they can't bet on football games, well then they should play Azure Dreams. They'll find out very quickly. Because you can borderline exploit this thing. You can basically bet on the other races to win, and you can just flunk the race and earn the big bucks. It's not like 100% guaranteed, but it almost feels like it is. I hadn't actually done this prior to this playthrough, but I did try it, just to see for this video. And yeah, I tried it 5 times and I earned big money out of 4 of them. If only I could figure out a way to bet against myself in real life. Although knowing my luck, I'd probably end up losing that one too somehow. It is a fun side distraction that reminds me a lot of Chocobo Racing, the minigame in Final Fantasy VII. Not the standalone game, obviously. There's a wind farm to the south of the city, and there is a bit of an issue. It's broken, and there's only one thing they need to be able to fix it. Some guru's oil. Where is the oil? You guessed it, it's in the tower. On the 15th floor to be precise, which means it will likely be the first side quest of the game that you complete. This is one I've always struggled to understand the point of. Everything else has a point of some sort, whether it's good or slightly bland, but at least it's some sort of point. Getting the windmill back online doesn't really do anything of use as far as I know. The only thing it does is allow you to buy a certain kind of food, which you won't want anyways. You definitely won't be taking this into the tower with you, so yeah, it's a bit pointless, but perhaps it gives you a taste for the concept of a side quest, since it will be the first one you will naturally accomplish unless you really balls up. The gym is easily one that's missable. In fact, I believe as a younger fellow, I don't remember ever doing it, because in order to get this building suggested, you need to talk to the man behind the counter of the sword shop, which, if you know the game up to this point, you will never go in because it's useless. You don't need to go in there. So who's gonna go and walk behind the counter multiple times to talk with that guy? Almost nobody. But if you do talk to him multiple times, he will eventually suggest building the gym. And it doesn't really do much because, just like in real life, the gym is only used to show off to lesser beings than yourself. There's just a simple minigame in here where you throw weights. You don't get any reward aside from pumping up your own ego. Again, modeling gyms in real life. It is a nice place though, I'll give it credit for that. It's just a shame it's a little bit hidden away, as I think most people wouldn't unlock it like myself. The amusement center is built in a similar fashion, except this time you need to speak to the carpenter's assistant. He's a gamer obviously and suggests building the amusement center. Thankfully, unlike the gym, there is a little bit more to it, but not too much. There is a whack-a-mole, which is kind of fun, and then there's this octopus thing where they spit ink balls at you and you gotta bounce them back at them. I really can't get the hang of that one, I don't know why, but whack-a-mole, that's always fun, right? These are nothing more than slight distractions, but I think as mini games, I think they're kind of acceptable, you know, they're okay. However, the hospital. The hospital is vital for part of the story. Standing by itself in terms of gameplay function, you'd initially believe it's somewhat superfluous. It doesn't really do anything aside from being able to buy cheap medicine, which is nice, but considering the 5-item limit, it isn't something you'll be taking into the tower with you, so even if it's 10 pence cheaper than elsewhere in town, you won't be visiting here often. And it's not as though you wake up here after a particularly rough night in the tower, which, if you did, that would have been an improvement. It'd perhaps hammer home the severity of the loss rather than just waking up in bed from a punch with your girlfriend. But I'm getting distracted because this is important for one of the love interests that Ko has. It starts out super dinky, but if you give the doctor a chunk of cash, it will make the hospital much bigger. Sadly, that doesn't open up any mini games or anything like that, but it does allow Cherrl to appear in the story finally, so it's not something to neglect, and I'll talk about her more a bit later on. The library is a similar such girl-catching device. You may be deceived into thinking that there's already a library within Monsbaiya, but you are mistaken. That's just an old dude with a lot of books. He's a bit of a hoarder, one may say. You may even say it's a slightly boring place because even after you've visited a couple of times, it seems this place doesn't really do anything. But you're wrong, and it proves why Azure Dreams can be a game that's filled with mystery, intrigue, and not so obvious mechanics. You need to visit him a lot. Watch his bookshelves fall over and over again until finally he will open up the chance for Ko to be altruistic once more by building a library for the town. It's a nice place, and the primary purpose is to meet one of the love interests I'll talk about very soon, but it is a missed opportunity for endless amounts of flavor text to fill up the voids in our imagination. What other things about this world could this treasure trove of books tell us? You know, RPGs are known for their flavor text that often sets apart the wheat from the chaff. In my opinion, Skies of Arcadia, my favorite joint game of all time, is just brimming with unbelievable amounts of flavor text by interacting with items, and I think the library here could have done that. Or maybe it would have hurt me too much, maybe wondering when the sequel was coming along. The swimming pool is a nice place that doesn't need to be built because it's already there. The issue is you can't actually go in it because the manager, Watto, won't let you. I guess he's too busy with his scrap dealership and slave trading to be, opening up his communal pool. Oh, not that Watto. The problem with this guy is that there's been a robbery. The water medallion has been stolen by a monster. And if you hadn't fallen asleep during the monster part of this video, you can probably guess which monster has stolen it. A picket. A picket who is way above his station, like now up on the 25th floor of the tower. You'll know who he is thanks to his now blue color. The 25th floor is no mean feat, and it will be a long time before you actually get up there to be able to grab the medallion and finally open the swimming pool, which has the most useless slide in human history. You can walk in the water, but if you go in the changing room, you can actually swim. You can talk with the people and just generally piss around. And rather humorously, once you're down to your skivvies, you're not allowed to run. Ko, he knows the rules. No running without your shoes on. There is one other special use for the swimming pool, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And that is Monsbaiya. That's a bunch of stuff that slowly opens up as you play the game, and much of it is very well spread out. You can't unlock all the stuff too early, nor open up too many things together. And it's all thanks to the cost. On average, a standard trip to the tower, no matter how far you get up, you'll probably be seeing a decent 6,000 quid, maybe 10k per adventure. You can get lucky with some eggs if you want to sell them, and of course, a cursed sword or a troll hammer, that'll set you up much better. But you should be expecting around 8 to 10k, which most certainly is not enough to buy almost any building. An upgrade to the temple or hospital, fine, but when some buildings are like 30k, 40, you will need multiple trips in order to build just one of them, never mind everything. And the casino is 100k, which is insane. But I get it because that's so exploitable if you were in that kind of mood. I think it's fabulous in how things develop around town, and I still think to this day that despite its flaws, it's one of the best town building sections in gaming history, and I think they struck the perfect balance, whether on purpose or by accident. There's enough of a grind, there's just enough freedom, just enough reason to do everything, and they're not predictable. Some unlock minigames, some unlock romance options, some just let you piss around in a puddle. You don't know what's gonna happen. Where some town building segments in other games go wrong is that they don't give enough reason or enough interesting of a reason to do it. Like it'll be something good but bland. Like build this thing and it'll give you a 15% boost in attack power. Well, alright, that's good, but it doesn't let me bumble on a comedy routine and watch dances. Maybe one will unlock a new attack formation. Yeah, good. But does that allow me to get stalked by a nerdy bookworm? I don't think so. Everything feels unique, has a purpose no matter how small to enhance this world. Throwing weights in a gym? Pointless, but I love it. It's added a minigame. There's only one where I feel it didn't do anything to build the game up, and that is the windmill one. It doesn't do anything aside from being able to buy a pointless item. Which, yes, I know, a certain girl in the game loves it, but by the time you get to this point in the game, she's probably already quite smitten with you. Other games just have you building stuff just to build stuff, just to make the place bigger, or your completion percentage to go up, or to tick that box on the quest log and throw random loot at you. Azure Dreams hasn't got time for that unimaginative bullshit. Here's a bowling alley, here's another cute girl to seduce. As a kid, I could spend hours riding around on my bike, visiting people, talking to them, seeing how the townsfolk grow to appreciate Ko more and more for his exploits in the dungeon and his tax write-offs for the town. It always felt like there was something I could do, something I could work towards. It wasn't gifted to me, and it never felt so out of reach. Every day was progress, and Azure Dreams is just wonderfully balanced in that manner. I think it helps that the fact that there's nothing else you can really spend your money on. It would be a bigger pain in the arse if you had to buy equipment, upgrade them, buy monsters and such, but no, you can buy a crap sword if you're really desperate, but that's about it. The shops make the great excuse that demand is so high that they instantly sell out of stock just after it arrives. It makes you wonder why they even bother putting them in the game, but hey, world building I suppose. Although, I swear, as a kid, I thought if I kept selling eggs, eventually it would mean that they would get stock of certain monsters. Like if I sold 10 bloom eggs, eventually I'd be able to buy a bloom, which would be pointless because I'd already have the egg, of course, but it would be fun seeing their stock grow. And that's just my imagination running wild. Monsbaiya, I loved ya, but man, just the longing of staring out of the gate wondering when it would open up and let me out, let me go somewhere else, maybe to a second tower. The girls. One of the most fascinating aspects for me, both as a kid and as a teenager, was the dating aspect of Azure Dreams. This is certainly not the major focus of the game, but it's definitely very prominent. You can completely ignore this facet of it, but you will get a much more hollow experience if you do. There are 7 girls who are just waiting for you to seduce them, as much as a 15-year-old can. As you make your way in and out of the tower, you'll find these girls pop up in town, and if you play your cards right, you will make them fall in love with you against all odds. Totally nothing to do with your ever-increasing riches and giant mansion you'll no doubt get before you get them. Some girls are available from the off. One you can pretty much conquer quicker than your last visit to the pay-per-minute brothel, but some of them need to delve much deeper into the game before they will even appear, never mind be able to be conquered, and I'm going to introduce them all to you. Nico Southey is the first and most prominent girl in your life at the start of the game. Unlike the other girls available, she's actually a childhood friend, at least one may consider a friend. She's a neighbor, which are the people you were forced to play with as a child when your mum couldn't be asked to take you to see your real friends. We actually see her as a younger kid back then when your papa told you off for teasing her, which is the only real glance we get to see Ko being the legendary prick that he's supposed to be. Nico acts as almost the default girlfriend for Ko because she has the initial main responsibility of waking him up in the morning, because apparently Ko's mom can't be asked to take herself away from washing the dishes even for that. So in that regard, you're initially already feeling super close to her, way more than the other girls who you won't get anywhere close to for a hell of a long time. Nico is a tomboy character. She's a bit of a tsundere type, quick to get a bit angry and such, but she's a girl who wants to dream big. She's coming of age and she wants to see a future for herself and her town. Like any girl coming of sophistication, or at least trying to be, she thinks her town is a bit smeggy and lacking in culture. Just wait till she sees my big ripe ass poster. That's not culture. I don't want to be alive. So her big goal is to make this city more cultured. Fairly quickly, she'll set up a donation fund to swap the rank-looking pond into a nice fountain feature. You'll get into a bit of a bidding competition with Gosh, who is hell-bent on one-upping you. After a couple of donations of 1k, you'll be pleased to see the fountain is now complete. There is a bit of a period where you'll see Nico and Gosh together, almost like they're dating, or more likely Gosh clinging onto her and pretending that he's dating her. But she does feel he's quite a cultured person, especially compared to the uncouth Co, the scrubby little kid who took a bath in a barrel. I'm siding with her at this point. Would you date the tramp or the snobby rich guy? As a former tramp myself, I would date the snobby rich guy. And by tramp I mean in the British sense, not the American one. Although I most certainly would be in the American sense if I had the ability to do so. But after going in and out of the tower a few times, she eventually sees both of your true colors, because one day when you're out and about, you see a musician next to her fountain. He's called Cello and he's playing a cello. I bet he'll hate his parents till the day he dies. I'm hoping my daughter Fart Trumpet doesn't feel the same way about me. While you're enjoying the music like the cultured swine you are, Gosh rocks up and tells him to bugger off, stop poisoning his ear holes, totally blowing his cover about being a cultured gentleman. No, he just wants to get laid. It's an amateur mistake. And Nico sees this and dumps his arse and sees you for the newly minted cultured gentleman you are. Still ain't taking that poster down though, lady. When the conquering is done, I love the new sprite that she has. She really conveys the feeling of being head over heels excited about someone. She's probably not everyone's favorite girl due to her tomboyish nature and her penchant for kicking you out of bed in the morning, but she's certainly the most memorable due to her ever-present nature. Selfi Rhodes is the second girl in this list. She's initially the most unappealing of girls in the personality kind of sense, especially as a younger lad when she was the kind of girl who would have bullied me at school, but I would have a secret hate boner for her dwelling in my pants. But as I've gotten older, and selfish rich girl is seemingly a desirable trait if Instagram is anything to go by, I've actually warmed up to her quite a lot. Selfi is the younger sister of Gosh, your rival, and she very much looks down on you. But there is a sense that an essence of her just following her brother, as though that's what she's supposed to do, almost in a naive way. You'll find her hanging around outside her mansion, and if you talk to her often enough and ply her with gifts, you'll bump into her quite often on the second floor of the tower. If you're an eager beaver like myself, you'll see her more often than Gosh at the start of the game. There's often a bit of banter from her as she puts you down, but the more you get to know her, eventually, one visit to the tower, you'll see her getting attacked by a monster and you can help her, like saving her. She doesn't immediately fall for you, but she starts to look at you in a different light and starts to question her previous behavior. At this point, you may see her hanging around town in an unusual place. She's not outside her home, but she's in front of the fountain. She's obviously going through a bit of internal turmoil, and as thanks for you saving her life, she awkwardly gives you a monster egg, which is awesome. What's it gonna be? Is it gonna be an exclusive monster? Some variant of a normal monster? Maybe a monster we haven't seen yet? It's a Palumpa. Well, thanks for nothing. I mean, she could have at least given us a dark Palumpa, because they're impossible to get, and that would have been like a sweet reward, even if it's completely useless. Now it's just extra useless because we definitely don't need a Palumpa. Gosh, by the way, is angry at her, and Nico is angry at you, and there's definitely a bit of jealousy in the air, which is the only major kind of crossover between two dateable ladies. You kind of need to get far enough in both Nico and Selfi's quest to see this far, which, as a kid, I didn't really do in any decent time. I think it's because when I was younger, I thought there was no way Selfi would be dateable, she despises me too much. But then I leveled up in my video game brain and realized character development is a thing, and hatred can't always stop love, or some bullshit like that. Anyways, after chatting with her and bribing her a bit more with some Louis Vuitton handbags, there's a moment in the tower where she repays the debt and then some as you get ambushed by a rogue U-boat. Not sure why it's 7 floors lower than normal, but you get chased around in a comical fashion. But Selfi comes to the rescue and almost sacrifices herself to save you. That's when the serious personal doubts set in and her sprite starts to change as she questions her actions. And eventually, after some persuasion, you decide you've both fallen in love with each other and Selfi is yours. Our next girl is the owner of the local store, Fur. And let me tell you right here, right now, what is the single worst thing about Azure Dreams? Her name. Her name is Forgots. 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 Now, I don't take much pleasure in a pun. In fact, if I ever make a pun, I have to remind myself to self-punish afterwards. And I tell you, there was a thin line between Azure Dreams being one of my favorite games of all time and being instantly disliked. It was close, but thankfully, thank all that is holy, she doesn't actually have a bad memory. It's just a random pun, which makes it far more palatable compared to if she had like early onset dementia, okay? She's not a forgetful person, so it's alright. So, Fur, like all girls in this game, she certainly has her own personality, but it's much harder to grasp right off the bat since she's not particularly likable right from the beginning. She's a slow burner of a lady. Right from the start of the game, just like the rest of the town, she appears to not only look down on Ko, but actively bully him. Snide remarks all over the place. What we don't realize, or what may not be obvious to some people, since we only get a brief look at Ko's upbringing, Ko has always been a little bit of a shit. He teased her just like we saw him tease Nico in the introduction. This is almost like vengeance, or perhaps more like banter, because you do slowly get the sense that it's almost affectionate teasing from Fur, even if that's not explicitly clear. It's reciprocal bants and she is the banter queen. You really start to like her when the relationship is building up nicely. You'll see Gosh pop in once or twice to her shop, and if you pay attention, you'll notice that she way overcharges him for some cheap cream crap. And not only that, but later on when he visits again, she charges him even more than last time without him realizing it. Or perhaps he has too much pride in his wealth to say something about it. But that's when it kind of clicks with her. You feel like she's a bit of a bae after all. A defining part of nursing this relationship is when she has a music box just in stock, and for some reason, buying it plays a big part in her falling in love with you. I don't entirely get it, because if you buy it and then gift it to her, she's just like, yeah, I'll probably try and sell it again. Like, what? You think that there may be some sort of awakening within her, like, oh, you could see I really wanted this, but if I wanted to stay in business, there's no way I could keep it for myself. But you bought it and gifted it to me. You must really like me, or something like that. I'm not a writer, ladies and gentlemen, but you'd have thought it would have flowed something like that. But no, it doesn't happen. There is a moment when she's annoyed at you, but that's fairly normal for teenage girls, right? If you don't piss them off at least once for being a dumb boy, then you've probably accessed cheat mode in life, which is wrong and you know it. Apparently she's angry at you for not defending yourself when she brings out the big bants. She's angry Ko just sits there and takes it. She wants you to defend yourself. You know, this is like almost in olden time settings. She's probably gagging for a knuckle to the chin. That's what women used to like, right? Bloody hell. But eventually, you both sort of apologize to each other and she becomes your girlfriend, which is cool, except her character sprite often becomes rather unappealing. I mean, what the hell is that? She's doing a Gormy ostrich impression. It's funny how you can be massively attracted to a lady, but as soon as they start falling in love with you in return, it's really easy to lose interest. So now, Fur will be at your home once in a while and she'll be sweeping away. Your mum will congratulate you on finding free domestic help because she's obviously not a fan of getting off her arse and doing something with her time. If you're playing blind, it's likely that Fur may be the first person you actively get in your harem. She's almost always my first, not because I'm actively trying, it's just the convenient one to do first while doing all the others. You'll always be visiting the shop to buy gifts for other girls, so you might as well shower her with cream as well. Oh, that sounds wrong. So she's always the favorable one to bag first. In fact, I can't even remember a time when I haven't got Fur first. Just a pity about the overexcited giraffe impression. Patty Pan is by far and away the most simple of targets, especially if you've got a bit of dosh in the wallet. She is the daughter of the local restaurant owner, and she helps serve the customers and take orders. And yes, I'm trying to ignore the pun in her name, Patty Pan. They are real names, okay? They're real names. Patricia Pan. She's from Singapore, Chinese ancestry and stuff like that, okay? It's not because she's a chef. You go into the restaurant and you are offered the menu. Obviously, Gosh needs to stick his snobby nose in and will often react to what you order. If you buy something expensive, he says you're not good enough for it. If you get something medium price, you can have a bit of banter with him. If you buy something cheap, you can even get him thrown out of the restaurant because he basically says you're eating dog food, which obviously doesn't go down well with the management. One humorous aspect with her, something which I accidentally did rather than on purpose, was to leave without paying. Yeah, it's one of those restaurants where you pay at the end. No tip, of course, my kind of establishment. But if you finish eating and then you just walk out, she runs after you on the street. Just like Americans, when you don't give them 20% extra just because they have legs and can remember the message you asked to pass on to the chef. Anyway, you hide away. She won't serve you again until you pay your debt. And you'll want to pay it because that's how you can get to her heart. It's easy as hell because all you have to do is order everything at least once. You can even do it all in the same downtime from the tower. You can keep going in and out of the restaurant and stuffing your gut. Once you've ordered everything, when you go in again, the restaurant will actually be closed with her dad off to grab more ingredients, because you've obviously just bought everything and they don't have anything left. But she offers to cook for you, which is quite the honor. You can choose which meal you want, and if you paid attention to the previous meals, you will know that she is good at prawn, so choose that one. Then go in and out of the tower a few more times while visiting her. You'll be squared up with Gosh again, who gets jealous that she cooks for you but not for him. And it's at this point you've essentially got her as your girlfriend. It's a shame that there's not more unique scenes with her, just to get to know her better. She feels like the quickest of the bunch and the one we know about the least. But she's a nice girl, an honest girl next door type, the one your mom probably wants you to marry. Probably because she can take over cooking too. She can finally stop buying the microwave meals. Cherrl will possibly be the final or perhaps penultimate girl that you conquer, because like the other ones, she relies on you doing something for her to appear, and also getting to a certain point in the tower before she can properly fall in love with you. Cherrl is a sickly child. You won't actually see her around town unless you upgrade the hospital, which, let's face it, is more like the doctor's spare room at the start of the game. But if you do upgrade it, then Cherrl will finally appear in the house just north of it. You may have already spotted her open window before, but now you'll see her peeking through. If you walk past, you can give her a shock, and she throws her toy out of the window. I don't know if she let go of it in surprise or she was just trying to bludgeon you to death with it, but either way, she invites you into her house to thank you for giving it back to her and saying sorry. You find out that she is bedridden. She's not like a complete invalid, but she tires very easily. After visiting her multiple times between trips, she's very thankful for your friendship because, well, she doesn't have any friends and she can't see the outside world very often. She only has a little window. But one time, she's feeling strong and she asks you to escort her outside for a walk. However, she overexerts herself and collapses. And I love how Gosh just checks the hell out like, that ain't anything to do with me. I ain't dealing with the insurance claims. After she feels a bit better and leaves hospital, if you talk with her and the doctor, he says that he can cure her once and for all, but he needs a special healing herb that can only be found in the tower. It is a long way up. You'll be getting a nosebleed by the time you get to this on the 28th floor. It's actually the highest side quest item in the game, so naturally, it may be one of the last things you do. After multiple more visits, Cherrl is properly cured. At which point, depending on how you respond to her, she will become a nurse working for the doctor. She's 14, just let her empty the bins or something. No surgery, please. But no, if you say you have a wound, she will attend to it with her big massive hat. I'm not sure your mom will be pleased with this one because how can she help around the house? So yeah, Cherrl may not be your final conquer, depending on how you go about your adventure, but she is the one I feel is the most sincere, the one with the most heart, and something you'd find in more serious visual novels with romance aspects. Selfi is very shallow. Patty's just kind of there. They kind of lack a heart and soul, but Cherrl has one of the deepest ones, like 100%. You feel very satisfied as though you're genuinely helping someone, and it would naturally lead to them falling in love with you. You technically help everyone in some way, but Cherrl has the most gratifying and wholesome one. Vivian Merca may also be a contender for the final girl you conquer. She is a dancer, but again, she may not appear until you've done something of its significance, namely the pub. The pub is run by Okami, which I'm pretty sure means all-powerful god or something in Japanese, but those who do provide booze are often worshipped, so I get it. At some point she'll mention to you that she has started this boozer in the hope of seeing her long-lost love who went adventuring in the tower. She came to find him and wanted to wait here, so she might as well earn the moolah while she's doing that. She mentions to you that he wore a striking blue cape, unmistakable. So, when you rock up to the 20th floor of the tower and you see a neatly folded blue cape, you think, wow, he's been house trained. And then you realize he's dead. And that's exactly what Okami thinks when you shove it in her face. She gets all emotional and shuts down the pub. There's no point working here anymore if her lover is dead. She hates you for telling the truth, but her trusty barman consoles you saying that you did the right thing, even if it's hurting her right now. She'll be thankful in the future. And as the sun rises, if you visit her a couple of times between tower visits and you say the right things, she does come around. After that, the bar is open again, and in comes a newcomer to the town, Vivian. Vivian is a wannabe dancer. A good comparison would be those girls who want to be an actress, so run off to Hollywood, but find themselves in the wrong kind of movies. Okay, she's not that desperate, but she is down on her luck, and she has a nice dance with you, and you get to know her a little bit. Eventually she opens up about dreaming to be a dancer. If only there was a real theatre in town that she could work at. Oh, you mean the one I built in town 5 hours ago? And she and Fun get in touch, and she starts to work there. But it's not all plain sailing, because despite her being a decent dancer, she's making a lot of mistakes. If you go there between tower trips, you'll also see her trip, pretty much. She's spinning the wrong way, she's out of time, and as we all know how dancers can be, they be bitchy as hell, complaining about her, and it sucks her enjoyment out of the job. They're even rude to you. Like, alright bitch, I built this place. You'd be down the back of an alley for a fiver if it wasn't for my philanthropy. She's down in the dumps, and you go for a walk with her, and even Gosh, almost like a throuple, and it's mildly alarming, he seems like a normal, nice person, kind of. Sure, he's a Klingon, and they kind of ignore him, but to rejuvenate her interest in dancing, you let her go back to the pub and dance there one more time, just to feel what it's like to dance without the pressure to perform, and you and Gosh are just there, finally seeing eye to eye, having a bit of a bro moment. It's like he's let his guard down and the snobbish facade has faded away for a brief moment. I'd have liked to see more moments like this, moments when you actually have a bit of respite, an armistice. You know, every anime series needs that moment where the bratty rival gives you a nod of respect and vice versa. Like a team up situation. This is kind of like teaming up, but teaming up on hitting on a sexy dancer lady. From then on, she's way better at dancing on the big stage and you sort of save her career. Finally, you can put a ring on it. Okay, you can't actually marry any of the girls, which was a rumor back in the day. In fact, I distinctly remember GameFAQs, Wikipedia, and even dedicated Azure Dreams websites claiming rather authoritatively that the Japanese version, the Japanese game, did allow you to marry girls. But it was just a rumor and didn't actually exist, sorry guys. Now Vivian, bless her, she is my least favorite of the girls. She's the eldest of the bunch. She's 18 going on 35. That's always a bit weird for me with Ko being 15, and that's coming from me, who actually prefers more, shall we say, experienced ladies, but also her sprite work is just mildly unappealing. Her helmet hair, her impossibly stiff dress, I've just never been into her, but I'm sure she could take care of Ko very well indeed. Finally, we have Myria, the stalker girl we all wish we had, but when it happens in real life, we all want to go into FBI witness protection because it's never as sexy as you'd think. This lady, being somewhat of a bookworm, is found in the library, but you'd only know that if you built the damn thing, which you can do so after bothering the obsessive book hoarder nearby. She's a fairly simple get, you just need to visit her over and over again a few times, hear her ramblings, just play along, pretend you're interested in what she's saying, you know, the usual girlfriend catching techniques. Just gotta wait a few years before you let them realize you didn't give her monkeys all along. Sorry love, I genuinely despise shopping for clothes with a particular hatred for trying them on. I'm never doing that again, but it's too late now because we're married. Eventually her glasses will get bumped off her by Gosh, and you can pick them up and give them back to her. You then sort of become her knight in shining armor, and she becomes a little bit obsessed with you and rambles even more than normal. We then get invited to go to the swimming pool with her, and then, Okay, well that's an interesting turn of events. She's gone from being in the relegation zone to being nicely in the Champions League qualification slot. She's up there. Even Gosh gets some embarrassment as he starts hitting on this newly found hot girl, only for her to freak out at the fact that he's ignored her when she was nerdy. But yeah, it's at this point she's enamored with you. Her eyes start flashing and stuff, like all proper nicely psycho, and it's at this point she starts stalking you. When you leave a building, you'll often see her following you. Eventually you have to confront her, and you get all lovey-dovey. You know how it goes. And that's Ko and the 7 Coerced Anime Girls, which is the sequel to Snow White that Disney didn't want you to see. In terms of actually being a dating simulator, it is fairly shallow, mechanically speaking. Because if you think of something like the Tokimeki series where you often have to be in the right place, at the right time, with the right thing, actually, Azure Dreams, you just need to find them and find them often. At no point do you get locked out of conquering any of them. Even after completing the game, you can go back and finish them off, so to speak. They are surprisingly linear in their progression. As long as you chat with them between like tower visits, you're more than likely to conquer them. There is a gift giving system which I was convinced was massively important to making them fall in love with you, but playing it again for this retrospective, maybe I've been misled. I don't know if I'm just wasting my cash. It is nice to see their reaction, I suppose, and it's nice to feel like a Bobby Big Bollocks where everyone thinks you're a bit of a prick, but they can't resist the BMW you rocked up in. There is usually only one key event in each girl's arc, or like one cock block that you need to get through. Like Mia can only be there if you've built the library, and if you've not been the most exemplary of citizen, you may have only visited the book dude's house once and thought, this guy's a boring fart, I'm not coming here again, and then not being compelled to build a library for him. You need to visit him like 4 or 5 times between the towers, so it can be difficult in that regard. Having the theater and helping the bar quest may also not register too much with players, because in comparison to other places in town, the bar is remarkably dull. You may not hear about the fallen warrior with the blue cape, which is the key to Vivian arriving, so that is the tricky part, I suppose. But once you've found the girl, I don't think it's hard to conquer them, although that just could be my perspective having played this game so many times. And if you're really stuck about where to find the ladies or what to do, there is a fortune teller in town who you can visit and she will guide you about your next step. Either way, this mechanic was mind-blowing to me. I had never seen anything like it. I couldn't imagine a Final Fantasy game with a dating mechanic. Little did I know Final Fantasy VII did have a secret dating mechanic, but still, nothing as prominent as this. Obviously there is Harvest Moon, but I'd never even heard of that until the GameCube. Building up relationships with anime girls, that was super interesting. I didn't have a girlfriend until I was like 17, so you can imagine how much of a power fantasy trip it was for me. Now that I'm older, I'm more aware of like Japanese game industry stuff. This is kind of standard over there, even during that era, but making it to the West, that was a brave move. It wouldn't have been out of the question for like the localization team to have gutted that gameplay out completely, so props to Konami for having the righteous balls to keep it in. Because I tell you, I bet a ton of people were made to feel uncomfortable by some aspects, namely the age. I actually forgot that Ko was 15 in this game, which actually makes me feel way better about it. He's just a kid, they're just kids, it's puppy love. It's fine. It's okay if you take advantage of a borderline disabled naive girl. It's puppy love, alright? And yeah, I think Cherrl, as sweet as she is the one that I'm like, eh. Now, I'm a normal person, so I'm not going to label it as problematic because she's 14. She's pretty much the same age as Ko, even if she still looks a bit younger than she's got a doll. She's literally called Cherrl Child. That's her actual name, but whatever. In the end, it's rather cute. It's like teenagers pretending they're all adults, but in the end, everyone's just kind of naive. But Ko, what a baller, having 7-girl harem at 15, what a guy. I only knew one kid at school who was similar to that, but that's because he had fingers the size of rolling pins. So what is the point in the girls? Well, aside from the challenge, the quest, the humorous situations, the power trip, there's not really that much to it. The main thing is that they'll hang around your house for a bit after a visit to the tower, and they'll take in turns in waking you up in the morning. They have their own personality and dialogue, which is fun, and it's more interesting than just having Nico and your sister waking you up all the time. They also give you a big wet kiss before you head out, and squabble over each other. You know, that's nice, I suppose. And maybe the best thing is the swimming pool. I've mentioned this briefly in the town section of this retrospective and with Mia, but I shied away from telling you the best part about it because the best part for a 15-year-old boy, the swimsuits. Once you've conquered a lady, they will randomly appear at the swimming pool with a unique sprite and a change of outfits. I will leave no comment as to how interesting this is to you, but as a kid, holy crap, it's like I didn't need a girlfriend. Now, I know what some of you may be rushing to comment about, the Japanese version, because growing up and reading about this, pretty much everywhere told me that the localization did cut one romance option away from the Western release, and that was Gosh. Yes, in the Japanese version, you could bring Gosh to your side, but they didn't want that icky gayness in the Western release, so they had to take it out. Like, this was widely circulated as a fact almost, but in fact, just like if Ko and Gosh were together, turns out to have been a big load of bollocks. I find it fascinating that both this and the idea of marrying the girls was a lie made up by someone, and the whole community took it as a valid thing. But it's not. You can't date Gosh in the Japanese release, you can't marry the girls either. It only took 20 years for a Western Azure Dreams fan to ask a Japanese Azure Dreams fan and get that rumor thrown in the bin. I can just imagine the moment. You know, like the building of the Channel Tunnel, where the English team and the French team, they sort of met in the middle and they made a small hole where they shook hands with each other. I can just imagine like a middle-aged American dude and a really confused Japanese dude who's just shouting through the hole that in fact there was no sausage jousting, no! Something like that. I'm kind of disappointed it's not actually there because it would have been a nice twist. I genuinely thought it would have been like a really awesome addition. But I'm also pleased that it wasn't there because it means that this game wasn't censored. You know, censoring a game is very, very rarely a good thing, and I've spent the last quarter of a decade thinking that one of my favorite games of all time was censored, but it's not. So although I am disappointed Gosh wasn't as prominent as I thought, hey, at least Azure Dreams wasn't censored. Overall, as I said, while this isn't vital in terms of the proper goal of the gameplay, I genuinely believe Azure Dreams wouldn't be anywhere near as good without it. They've made this genuinely awesome dungeon crawling gameplay, but then augmented it by having a totally unimportant but incredibly compelling dating sim stuck onto it. I really wouldn't think Azure Dreams is the masterpiece it is without it, because it's one of the trifecta of things that culminates into one of the most memorable gaming experiences of my life. You know those boring middle class people who have them like little signs in the kitchen that says love, laugh, live? For me, I'd have dungeon crawling, town building, dating sim. That's all you need in life. And while some probably think the dating aspect is a bit of fluff, translated by someone who just started to learn English, then I get it, but Azure Dreams would not be Azure Dreams without it. And that is something I should mention, a bit of an elephant in the room. In terms of the English, this is one of the most surreal experiences you'll ever have, because I'm pretty sure whoever translated it was probably smoking crack at the same time. It's hard to put into words, but I'd say you're lucky if the sentence following the previous one actually matches what was just said. It's absolutely bananas, and it makes it feel like some sort of comedy show. It's just non sequiturs all the way down. And it's a double-edged sword in many aspects. Mostly two, that's why it's a double-edged sword. You kind of feel like you're missing some actual decent dialogue and potential character connections and, you know, sense. Making sense of the whole thing would be lovely. It was obviously translated by two people, one who knew what they were doing, but they couldn't be arsed and wanted to finish at 5 to 5, and then another guy who just suffered a mild concussion. They came together to create this beautiful mess of a translation. And the other edge of the sword is that it's just utterly charming. Your mouth is always smiling, but your eyes have that bewildered look as like, what the frig is going on? So make sure you do all the dating stuff if you're looking for that feeling once more. Azure Dreams may be forgotten by most people these days, mostly because it wasn't even known to begin with. But like me, there are a few hardcore enthusiasts who try to keep its memory alive. There is some insane fella out there who made a randomizer for this game. Like, you know, there's randomizers for a few games out there, you know, like Pokemon, Zelda, Metroid, but Azure Dreams was probably not on the tip of anyone's tongue when you asked them, you know, which games probably had a randomizer, but much respect to this dude who organized this to add some replayability to the game for someone like me who pretty much knows this game inside out and lacks that sense of surprise, which is one of the best things about the game. Adding replayability to the game is an absolute godsend because I remember back in the day, I was looking longingly outside the city gates, just hoping and praying there would be a second tower to go to. Like me and my mate, we would just like suggest ideas about how to unlock a new location. Now we'd finish the one here. But in the end, that was just our imagination, our dream. It wasn't actually a real thing. There was never a second tower. But Azure Dream fans, back in the day, you might want to take a seat for a second, get the nurse on standby because you may have a heart attack. Because there is, I don't know how to break it to you, I'm just going to say it, okay? There is a second tower. There is a second tower. Now, maybe it looks like I'm joking, but I'm not. I don't know how to process this information myself, but there is a second tower in Azure Dreams. The only problem is, you just can't access it. There is a second tower in here, but for whatever reason, they decided to not program in the ability to open it. It is there, it's just locked. And it was only thanks to the Randomizer creator looking at the code who actually found that there is a second tower in here with 100 floors. It's accessed on the second floor, but the opposite side of where you normally go up to the third floor. It's there, and the hacker opened it up for us so you can actually go in. And aside from being slightly buggy in some aspects and can break the game right at the top, it is mostly in a complete form. They just didn't polish it off. I know Azure Dreams was delayed, and maybe that's the reason they decided to cut it out, or maybe they thought, it wasn't balanced or fun, or have much need for it because it's just repeated content. And I get it, it is a bit overkill, but it's really interesting nonetheless, and you could have bet your mortgage on me loving it if I had the chance to play it back in the day. If you have a copy of the game, you can use his randomizer to change the game file to open up the second tower for you. And yes, you don't need to add all the other randomizer stuff if you don't want to. I'm not linking it, but a quick Google search will help you find it too. I don't think it's necessary for casual audiences, but as a hardcore Azure Dreams fan, I think this is almost like a miracle. And I believe all the unique items that are found in the Barong, like the weird medicine, the trained one, the weird scrolls, they can be found naturally within the second tower, which indicates that maybe it was an oversight that they could still be found in the Barong. That could have been the new-ish content, but there are no new monsters or anything. It's just a bigger, longer challenge that most casual people won't care about. But as your Dreams lovers, I can already hear that PlayStation boot up sound, and I wish you well on your journey. Genuinely, if I could erase one game from my memory and just start afresh, rebooted, it would be Azure Dreams. Its sense of mystery, promise of new surprises, that constant unknowing of how far you'll get this time around. What eggs will you pick up? Will you see a brand new monster? What else can I build in this town? Who else can I date? As a kid, it was an endless sense of adventure, and the slow rollout of new content as you got better and better was just amazing. Azure Dreams is the perfect roguelite in my opinion. It has a great sense of balance of being brutal but fair, and you do have a tangible sense of progression, but it is also very willing to sit your ass back down on the floor when you get a bit too cocky, losing everything in your inventory, including your badass leveled up sword and shield. But your familiars will always keep their levels. It can really rip your guts out, but it's never the end of the world. You've always got your familiars and your dosh, which, as I've learned in life, that's the only thing you need. Monsters and money. Sadly, it seems there is no place in the world for Azure Dreams anymore. Konami have forgotten all about the franchise. I mean, as far as I know, it's never seen any kind of re-release, even as a PS1 classic and such. And it's even more punishing that we can see Konami, they're starting to rejuvenate themselves with retro releases of Castlevania, new entries for Silent Hill, and even HD ports of almost all of the Metal Gear Solid games, like right now. But they still don't give a monkeys about Azure Dreams, which is weird because roguelikes, Pokemon-likes, they are all the rage these days. You can barely move for the amount of indie games being pumped out that have similar mechanics, and yet lack the heart and soul of Azure Dreams. Azure Dreams can come back, but I genuinely believe Konami does not even remember it. They don't know they have this game in their catalog. I mean, the series did see a pseudo-sequel in 2006 on the Nintendo DS called Tao's Adventure, Curse of the Demon Seal. I never actually played it since I didn't realize it was a sequel, nor do I remember seeing it in stores at the time. And I've only played it for about 10 minutes, so I can't personally say for sure, but it was critically mauled at the time. Although to be fair, Azure Dreams didn't set the critical world alight either, and for me, it's a 10 out of 10 game all day long, so maybe maybe I'll take a look at that one properly another day. A slightly more enticing prospect released a few years after the PlayStation 1. In 1999, a Game Boy Color demake of Azure Dreams was made to capitalize on the new Pokemania phenomena. It's a game that lacked the town building aspect and the dating sim, but doubled down on the tower content with a changing battle system. And it's this game, the Game Boy Color version, that I'm taking a look at for this episode for the bonus content over on Patreon, a short 10-minute-ish video that Patreon supporters have early access to. You can watch it right now on patreon.com/abitmorejordan. Or if your typing skills aren't up to scratch, there is a handy link in the description. Have you played Azure Dreams before? What did you think of it? Am I insane for enjoying this as much as I do? Seriously, it is the most replayable game of all time for me. Well, unless we count Football Manager and Three Kingdoms, but I genuinely would love to know your thoughts on it. Will you send Konami a message telling them to re-release this bad boy, make it easier for you to get your hands on it legally? That would be a start. There are signs Konami are reviving themselves somewhat, you know. They've done the classic collections in Japan, they're kicking ass with the Power Pro baseball series and that board game that sold like 1 billion units, so they're even bringing back Suikoden. Come on Konami, be like Ko, learn from your protagonist, spread that wealth to other smaller projects. Either port Azure Dreams or make a new one. I think there is a market for it. Pokemon is still huge, and indie games are taking the concept by the balls. I mean, we have Temtem, Nexomon, Monster Sanctuary, Monster Crown, just to name a handful of them. I swear to God, I would promote a new Azure Dreams like I was the president of Konami. I would sell that shit to my grave. Well, maybe not, but you get the idea. Now, with the main analysis over, I do kind of want to talk about some of the more special, little secret parts of the game that can make your life easier. These can make the game easier, some more than others, but I didn't want to put these in the main part of the game because, I don't know, I kind of feel like discovering these for yourself add to the sense of mystery the game has. These are not mind-blowing or game-changing, but more like cool side bits that I want to talk about. But only to those who probably don't want to play the game, even though you should. Play the game, alright? So, here are some cool things I want to talk about. The big thing. The one thing that I think many experienced Azure Dreams players found for themselves by sheer feeling alone, the safe. The safe in your house has a magical property. Either that or I'm just a superstitious mofo, because I don't know if this is actually a fact, it's more of a feeling. The more items of a certain kind you put in your safe, the more likely they are to appear in the tower again. If you put 5 wind crystals in your safe, you can bet your fat ass they'll pop up more regularly in the tower. This makes the game a bit more relaxing. You can keep the sweat on for the vindaloo rather than sharing it with this game. Same with red and blue sand. I don't know what it is, I don't know if it's true, but it feels like you'll upgrade your sword and shield much faster if you store away a handful of them at your home first before you start upgrading shit. I find myself as someone with a decent amount of self-restraint. I am not one to use save states or exploits because I find I'm only cheating myself, but it's almost from muscle memory alone that I instantly use this. I don't know if I want to call this an exploit because it makes me feel like I need a shower, and I already have enough people telling me that on a daily basis. I don't need my conscience telling me the same. There has been an update, ladies and gentlemen, because after I recorded that, I was just having a flick through this little thing right here. This little strategy guide that I bought like years and years ago, and I randomly forgot about it, but just when I was putting this together, I found it in my drawer and I was flicking through it, and you know what? It's true. It's all true. I found that the guide actually tells you this. It tells you to stick things in your safe and you'll find them in the tower. Bloody hell, I don't know why they implemented this, but I love it. And speaking of weapons and shield upgrades, that's a hugely important thing that can go very, very wrong. Not only because you can lose your weapons if you faint, but as mentioned in the main section, there are plenty of traps laying around that can actually downgrade your equipment. That's massively frustrating. While fainting can't exactly be combated, you can fight the traps, because certain equipment cannot be downgraded. You'll notice that there's a trap called a rust trap. Well, little Jimmy, have you ever seen gold rust? And I mean proper gold, not the gold you bought at Doncaster Market from the guy with 3 teeth. I mean proper real gold. You may notice that the gold sword starts off pretty pony as one of the weakest weapons you can find. It earns good money, but it's hardly a fighting machine. But you can upgrade it, and upgrade it more, and the rust traps are completely useless against it. Same with the diamond shield. This is much rarer, but has the same non-rust properties, so you can keep powering it up to a monstrosity, and it will never be downgraded. Even more interesting is the trained wands. I'm sure vets of the game will swear on their wands for their magical strength, but I don't bother with them too much, but since they're made of wood, they can't rust. Now, most wands can't actually be upgraded because, let's face it, throwing some sand at a stick is dumb. However, there is one special wand called the trained wand that is very, very rare, but that can also be upgraded. So that has the best of both worlds. You can have physical damage and high magical damage. What I'm saying is, get a gold sword or a trained wand and a diamond shield. Save up enough red and blue sands, put them in your safe, then go to town upgrading them with the wealth of upgrades that will now start appearing before you. They'll keep going up as long as you don't die. Medicinal herbs and pitta fruit are useful in this game for their primary use, which I of course mean by healing your health and familiar's magic points, but there is a neat little trick that can be used to give you a permanent stat boost. If your familiar is at full health and you give them a herb, their health will go up permanently by 1 point, and the same for MP. If you give them a pitta fruit when their MP is still full, then they will gain an extra permanent MP point. That's a superfluous point. While it is a small boost, done multiple times, you can really bring your familiar up from being something kind of mediocre into a beast. This can especially be helpful during the early stages of the tower, where 1 HP or 1 MP can make all the difference between a familiar fainting and staying in the fight. Likewise, the issue of MP running out will often haunt you. Pitta fruit can be found, and you may even take one into the tower with you. But considering the sheer amount of items that you can find, it's still a lottery and not guaranteed. So how can you top up your familiar's MP? Well, there are a lot of herb varieties. They can do various stuff like stop you being confused, standard situational stuff. That, for the most part, you won't need unless in very specific circumstances. Well, you can feed these to your familiar whether they need them or not, because they can also refill your MP. Just a little bit, like 3 or 4 points, but that is enough to keep you going. Every time you find one that's not immediately useful, pick it up and feed it to your familiar. Especially when your inventory is already full, just use them. It's like giving them a granola bar just to top up their energy levels a little bit. Now, if you really just want to break the game, like make it almost arbitrary in its difficulty, fusing, as I've said, can destroy the game pretty much. There are various combos that can achieve this, although you do have to be super lucky to, even get both on the same save file. But my advice, if you just want to break the game, like instantly, get a block and cross it with an Arachna. Congratulations, you've just beat the game. It's got full-on double attack and insurmountable defense. It helps that individually they are both fairly awesome and super rare, so it's not likely you'll have them both unless you're super lucky, but still, this is the easiest way to complete the game without lifting a finger pretty much. There are other powerful combinations, but I feel like this is just the game killer. Even myself, having an Arachna for this playthrough, even without combining it with anything, by the time it evolves, it's smashing through everything with its high attack rate. Sure, it's a glass cannon and can be taken out pretty easily, but if you directly command it to make sure it gets in the hit first, you are laughing. These are the two familiars you want, and that's it. That's just some little tips and tricks if you want to get by in Azure Dreams more easy. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you to those who support me on Patreon. Remember, they get to watch these videos early, ad-free. They get behind the scenes videos, and they can vote for content. They get access to a secret Discord, and they get a bonus video for every big video I make. I think it's worth it. And thank you to those who watched all the way through to the end of this unnecessarily long video about one of my favorite games of all time. Did I do it justice? Did I win you over? Are you interested, or don't you care? If you watched all the way through, please leave me a tasty egg emoji and money bags in honor of the monster eggs I pawned off into the animal trafficking market. And please leave it with a normal content. Don't just do the emoji because YouTube thinks it's spam, okay? Please enjoy the other mega videos I've put together. I'd massively appreciate if you did that. But not only that, I am starting another series of playing Dreamcast games. Not just some of them, every single one of them. They'll be public very soon. I'm just working on quite a few of them for the time being. But yeah, go check out on Patreon because a lot of them are on there already. Of course, I would love to give a big shout out to my executive producers, Alexander Cato, Brent McLean, FF14 Best RPG, JCrod7776, Vey, Sven Nowlertz, Wixit, Josh Foot, and Aldo SFC. Thank you for your wonderful, wonderful support.